Here we go. The last part of Sophie Page's To Marry a Prince. So I have 11 chapters for you here. I really hope you enjoy them. The first, just a little note, was read live on one of my Red Fox Book Club live streams quite a lot of months ago. And the other 10 were recorded regularly. So thank you so much for listening. Do leave me a comment down below. Share your thoughts and feelings on this final part and on this story as a whole. And let's get stuck in. Chapter 15. Best and Worst Proposals. Girl About Town. Richard made Bella bundle up in warm clothes and took her out of a side door. Nobody noticed them go. The big off-roader was standing there, its lights on and the engine humming. "Thanks, Bill," Richard said as a tall man in Highland dress got out of the driving seat. "You're welcome, sir. Miss, have a nice look at the stars." And the man went off chuckling to himself. "The stars?" echoed Bella, clutching the collar of her coat to her throat. "I don't believe it." "Don't argue. Bill has been warming this car up for you for a good 10 minutes. There's a car rug too, if you're chilly." Richard helped her into the vehicle, and it was indeed as warm as toast. Bella relaxed a little. "Where are we going?" "There's a painting hut on the hill. It's really good for looking at the stars." She looked at him suspiciously. "Are you winding me up again?" "I want to be alone with you without some member of staff or courtier or bloody nosy member of my family getting in the way," he said with sudden violence. "It seems like forever since we had some privacy." "I know." The painting hut was a small, single-story stone building. It might have started life as a shepherd's cottage, but now it had expanses of glass set into the walls and the roof. More important, there was smoke coming out of its chimney. There were vehicle tracks leading up to it, and Richard stayed in them, so that the off-roader swayed and bumped, but did not slide on the midnight ice that was forming over the impacted snow. "In, quickly," he said when they got there. The place was not locked. It too was as cosy as could be, with a wood-burning stove glowing in the hearth. But Bella did not look at the stove. She gazed at the stars. Walls and roof had been carefully replaced by glass, so no matter which way you looked, you saw only the night sky. It was like being suspended in space. The stars were so close you felt you could touch them, and the moon had a frosty halo. "It's amazing," said Bella, awed. "Yes. I come here to think. I always have. I was up here this afternoon before I came to meet you, and that's when I realized I had to bring you here. So, I'm here, and—" He drew a deep breath and turned to face her. In the moonlight, he looked handsome and passionate and deeply serious, but his voice was level. "Bella, it's been 3 months. I know I've already told you that I knew the moment I saw you. You must have thought that was crazy, but I did. I can't explain it. I saw you with your feet in the air, covered in bits of ivy, and it was like everything in me clicked into the right place at that moment. I know, I thought. So she's the one. That'll be all right then." He stopped talking, and she saw him swallow. "Only, of course, it isn't. Anyone who marries me marries the job, the family, the protocol." He almost spat the last word. I think that's always true, though, isn't it? I mean, if you marry a doctor, you end up answering the phone to an emergency in the middle of the night. What am I babbling about? Thought Bella. I'm being proposed to, for God's sake. Shut up, Bella Greenwood. She closed her eyes firmly and waited. Richard said, "And then there's the public." She nodded. "Bella, I know you don't want to be in the spotlight. We tried to keep out of it, both of us, didn't we? But you see, it can't be done. Or not for long. You've been brilliant, all the time. Funny and tolerant and kind and all the things I knew you'd be. The moment I fell in love with you. But... Hey, am I getting my marching orders? Not a proposal at all." He said very quietly, "Bella, I love you. I want to marry you. But what you see is what you get. The job is me. I can't not be what I am. If you can't take that, and I won't blame you, honestly, I won't, but if you can't, then please, will you tell me now? And we can say goodbye tomorrow with no hard feelings." She almost bounced with indignation. "No hard feelings? Are you out of your mind? Don't I get a chance to say yes before you write my refusal speech for me?" He stared at her in the starlit dark. "What?" She calmed down somewhat. "Ask me to marry you. Go on. Just ask." For a moment he looked almost frantic. "Bella, Then, typically, he drew a long breath and was calm again. It came out with the precision of a shopping list and about as much emotion. "I love you. I want to be with you. I want to make you happy. Please, will you be my wife?" She had known what she was going to say, had known for days, been certain, yet suddenly all her doubts rose up and locked her tongue. She found she couldn't say a word. Richard searched her face. "Why?" she managed at last. It was not much more than a croak. "I've got cold feet," she thought, appalled at herself. Scrupulously, he didn't touch her. "I go to a lot of weddings." His voice was reflective. "They're big promises. Heroic. In sickness and health, for richer, for poorer. They stop you dead in your tracks. You think, am I up to this? Can I really promise everything I have to give? And mean it? Really mean it?" "Everything I have to give," Bella repeated slowly. "Yes. And that's what you want? Only if it's mutual." Still, she hesitated, suspended between everything she'd known up to now and the unpredictable future. "Oh God, Bella, it's the one thing I'm certain of. I can do it with you." Still, she waited, not quite trusting herself. His voice suddenly ragged. He said, "How can I explain? I want to make you those promises. It just seems right. Not easy exactly, but natural." "Yes," she said, her doubts falling away as she recognized the feeling and the strength of it. "The next big thing in my life. Our lives." He held his breath as if he couldn't quite believe what she was saying. Bella leaned into him and kissed him, gravely and deliberately. It was acceptance and a promise, and they both knew it. "Yes, please, Richard. I would very much like to marry you." Afterwards, he was in tearing spirits. They bounced down the hillside with him singing Scotland the Brave at the top of his voice. He was all for bursting in on George's barn and announcing their news at once. But Bella, remembering the Queen's unhappy glances in her direction, said, "No, you have to tell your parents first." So he settled for a wild boogie instead. "But I'm rubbish at it," wailed Bella. "I bump into things, you know I do, and I've got 2 left feet." But nothing could curb Richard's enthusiasm. "I got you through the 8-some reel, didn't I? Stick with me, baby. You ain't seen nothing yet." The party was in full swing when they ran in hand. Grace Kelly style, Bella found, worked just as well for dancing in a barn as for reels. George and his team had hung tartan rugs over the walls of what must once have been a cow byre, and there were several glitter balls and a lot of blue lighting. Also a table full of drinks where you could have a simple beer or invent your own cocktail. Mothers had been baking for weeks, and there were sausage rolls, sandwiches, and a competitive selection of cakes. The dance floor was a patchwork of stone slabs and old floorboards, but nobody seemed to care much. There was no DJ, but a local band could, and did, do everything from heavy rock to punk hop. The lead singer did a passable imitation of Springsteen, too. "Dance with you," said Richard, not taking no for an answer. And he was right. She didn't fall over or kick anything. In fact, it was while an astonished Bella was delivering some eloquent pelvic thrusts to "I'm on fire" that Richard stopped her dead and said breathlessly, "Enough already. I've got a bad desire." Her smile was blazing. "Let's go." The night, as she afterwards told Lottie, should have been torrid. They were both racked with lust and had been behaving well all evening, and they hadn't seen each other before that for what seemed like a lifetime. Only it was very difficult to do torrid passion in a house with a frugal central heating system and drafts to make the north wind slink away, outclassed. After they'd twice lost the mountainous covers and Bella screamed for the wrong reasons, acute and agonizing cramp in her right calf, they collapsed into laughter and put lust on hold. "I'll take you to Barbados," promised Richard. He got out of bed and brought her the sapphire kimono that she had left over the back of a chair. He tied a big bow at her waist and then got back into bed, cuddling her up to his chest and tucking the heavyweight blankets round her ears. "Or the Sahara. I'll hold you to that." They were asleep almost at once. They were awoken by a discreet scratching on the door. Bella came awake to find Richard out of bed, shivering and swearing. She didn't blame him. She had no idea what time it was, but from the scrap of window she could see where the curtains didn't meet. The sky was still as black as a coal cellar outside. She put on the light. "Take my robe. I'm warm now." She pulled off the kimono and threw it towards him. He pressed it appreciatively to his face before pulling it on. Of course, it gaped across his chest, but it was better than nothing, thought Bella. The bedroom was icy. He thrust his feet into his dress shoes at the same time. "Thank you." He opened the door, indifferent to the rules, scandal, or even his own dignity. "What the he said with pardonable asperity. It was Julian Maddock. "I'm really sorry, sir." He even sounded it. "But the King says, please will you join him in the study as soon as possible? There's been a development." "What sort of development?" demanded Richard disagreeably. "More internet comment, I'm afraid. And an unfortunate photograph of Her Majesty. The press will be here any time." "Here? You mean you've set up a press conference?" Maddock was clearly shocked by the suggestion. "Certainly not. But outside, you know, in the village, asking people for their stories. bringing their checkbooks. We need, that is, the king feels we need, an agreed line. There was a pregnant pause. Then Richard said, "Oh, very well. We'll be down as soon as we've climbed into our Arctic weatherwear." He closed the door firmly. Bella pulled the covers up to her nose and watched appreciatively. "I fancy you in blue silk." He grinned briefly. "You fancy me in anything." "Thank God. Damn, I'm so tired of worrying about the bloody press. Oh well, I suppose we'd better get dressed and join the Council of War. Have you got a good thick sweater, or shall I bring one back for you?" She liked the idea of wearing his clothes. "Almost certainly mine isn't thick enough." He nodded. "Right, I'll bring you one." He went, leaving Bella to wonder dreamily whether any returning adulterer whom he met on the way would keep quiet about the fact that the Prince of Wales darted about Drummond House in a blue silk kimono. By the time Richard returned, Bella had pulled on all the clothes she had brought with her pretty well. He was wearing thick tweed trousers, double-knit socks and walking boots, and a green military jumper over several layers of natural fibre. Bella purred. Love the combat gear. Not as swashbuckling as a silk kimono, of course, but you look ready for action. He eyed her consideringly. "I can always take my Iran sweater away again." No, please, I didn't mean it." The big white thing was as solid as a horse blanket and just as cosy. Bella pulled it on over her stylish but inadequate cashmere, and instantly felt her frosted muscles began to thaw. It was ludicrously too big, of course. The sleeves hung over her hands, but it smelled of Richard's shampoo, and she knew that smell. "Thank you," she said, basking a bit. He put his arm round her, and they went to face the music. The study turned out to be a relatively small room, so that the big fire there did actually have some effect. The Queen was sitting beside it, looking elegant as always, but concerned. The King was reading a printout. George had been wrong about the absence of mobile phones. There was a photograph of the Queen with her tiara over one eye. It had been all over the Twitter sphere by midnight. The King handed the printout to Richard. "I don't understand some people. Don't they have anything to do except criticize others?" he said irritably. Richard ran his eye down the messages Dueling Maddock had printed out. Someone called Loyal Subject 101 said Bella attacked the Queen last night and has posted a photograph of Mother with her tiara coming off at the party. And then a bunch of idiots who need to get a life started arguing about whether it was deliberate or an accident, political or personal, spite or a Republican gesture. He cast the sheets away. Ugh, this is just ludicrous. Why are we wasting our time on it? Exactly, said the King with gloomy satisfaction. But the Queen said, "We can't just ignore it, Richard. These are very nasty allegations. Someone might actually try to hurt Bella in retaliation. Pansy tells me there have been rumours for weeks." "Then let's kill the rumours," said Richard calmly. "Tell them we're getting married and they can bloody well like it or lump it." The Queen put a hand over her eyes. Bella said frostily, "Excuse me, do I get a vote on this?" The King gave a bark of laughter. "You mean he hasn't asked you?" "Yes and no. Yes, he's asked me. No, we didn't talk about any public announcement." "Well, he mentioned it to me last week," said the King, stirring it. "Oh, really?" Bella narrowed her eyes at Richard. "Thought you were running a bit of a risk there, lad," said his father, starting to enjoy himself. Even the Queen said, Good grief, what's wrong with you, Richard? You go to war with me when I say I think it's too soon, and you still haven't asked Bella properly. I give up. I really do. Shut up, Mother, he said, still calm. He went down on one knee in front of Bella. Please, will you marry me and let me announce it to the world? There. We're sorted now, aren't we? She was outraged. Sorted? Mistake, said the king. Shut up, father. Bella, you know that dating a Prince of Wales isn't all joy, and you've spat on your hands and given it your best shot. If you've enjoyed it as much as I have, please, 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 let me tell the world you'll marry me. She stared down at him, transfixed. He said softly, I'm not complete without you. You know that. Why shouldn't everyone else know too? The Queen said, You've only known each other 3 months. Richard did not stand up, and he did not take his eyes off Bella's. Best 3 months of my life, he said. Bella felt as if she were in a high wind. You didn't like all of it, she pointed out, trying to get her feet back on the ground. You stalked out in a huff, and you got your revenge by not answering my messages. You know that was an accident. I know that it made me feel desperate. Hell, I even offered to write poetry to get you back. Oh, said the king. Big mistake. Father, we don't need audience participation. Shut up or go away. Bella said, Yes, you did promise me a poem. A trillet or something. And you've never delivered. Don't you keep your promises? What sort of omen is that? She waited for a torrent of denials. She had underrated Richard. I was negotiating, he said blandly. A triolet sounded good. I'm holding you to it, if you love me. Their eyes locked. There was a long pause. Richard looked very serious. What about a limerick? Bella was so startled she gave a shout of laughter and bent and kissed his nose. You are a shocking, devious man, and I love you. At once he leaped to his feet and took her in his arms. So, can I tell them you'll marry me? He whispered, for her ears alone. It'll be good, I promise. Yes, she said blissfully. Yes. Chapter 16. It's official. Morning Times. By the time the press started pouring into Drummond Bridge, there was a much bigger story than they had come for. The king sent Julian Maddock down to the gates to invite them in. While the staff set out chairs in the drawing room, Richard drafted what he would say, and Bella telephoned her parents with the news. Her mother was nearly silenced. My little girl. My dear little girl. Oh, Bella. Her stepfather took the phone from his wife. Your mother's weeping into some kitchen roll. What she means, of course, is that we're both delighted, and we hope you'll be very happy. We liked him very much. He lowered his voice. It would be nice if you could come and see her really soon, Bella. I think she needs to talk, and not on the phone. Yes, Kevin. And our very best wishes to Richard, he said, surprising her. Tell him he's on to a good thing. She was misty-eyed when she put the phone down. Dear Kevin. It was just as well that someone wished her well, because her father, predictably, went into a rant. He was on board a boat somewhere in the South Atlantic, and he had to talk over howling gales from the sounds on the line. He managed it easily. Never thought a daughter of mine would be so feeble. Succumbing to celebrity culture, that's what it is. Celebrity and social climbing. God, you're just like your mother. You stop that, yelled Bella. There's nothing wrong with my mother. She's a better parent than you ever were. At least I gave you ideas and some principles, he shouted back. What happened to them, eh? What happened? A bit of discomfort on your first expedition and you're back in London chasing some parasite because he's got an outdated title. When I get back... I love him, you moron, she shouted. Richard looked up from the desk where he was writing his piece and blew her a kiss. We're going to have a serious talk about what you'll do with your life. I've got news for you, Finn, Bella said more calmly. You're not on the management team. My life. Note the adjective. Mine, not ours. Now you can jolly well bog off, and don't call me until you're ready to be nice to Richard. God help me, he even admires you. You don't deserve it, you bigoted old freak. And she slammed the phone down with real fury. Richard sat back and applauded. That told him. Well, he is. What did he call me exactly? Richard asked mildly. I might use it in my speech. Bella gave an impatient sigh. Don't. It will only encourage him. He was rude about my mother, too. After he wandered away and left her to sort out having 2 children and no money. Bastard. Okay, I won't mention him. Not if it's going to turn you spitting mad, he said, amused. We're supposed to be giving the press good news, after all. Do you want to say anything? Do you want me to? I quite like I love him, you morons, but it's not very conciliatory, I suppose. Up to you. I'm not a great speech maker. Fine. If you change your mind, pinch my bum and I'll hand the microphone to you. Just imagining it put her into a much better humour. Even Lady Pansy, bustling in to give her some helpful advice on how to dress for the momentous announcement, didn't disturb her equilibrium. Did she, asked Lady Pansy kindly, want to borrow something from Chloe? No, thank you. But you can't wear... Lady Pansy indicated Richard's Aran sweater and the jeans. Richard said, This isn't a formal thing. We'll have a proper engagement session with the ring, the wedding day, the lot. The gig today is just a warm-up. Bella should wear what she feels comfortable in. Well, at least do your hair, said Lady Pansy, despairing. That's fair, agreed Bella. By the time she came back, brushed and combed, there was a dozen or so journalists, and rather more cameramen in the drawing room. The king was uncharacteristically chipper. The barbarians are past the gates, then, he said, and went off chuckling at his own joke to await Julian Maddox's signal. Richard said, The press secretary is going to be so mad about this. Bella cocked an eyebrow. You sound rather pleased. I like justice. He went skiing with a lot of smart friends and sent the second team to Scotland. It's always so bloody freezing he gets out of it every year, so he misses the juiciest story of the year. Serves him right. They lined up in the dining room while Maddox quieted the audience. Then a servant opened the double doors, and the king, resplendent in kilt and a tweed jacket, marched up to the hastily erected microphone. Richard and Bella followed. Welcome, said the king. Glad to see you. For once, I really mean that. There was surprised laughter. Got some good news, which my eldest son will tell you all about. And he went and sat down, beaming. Nobody could doubt that he was delighted. Richard put his arm round Bella's shoulders, and they went to the microphone. He didn't look at his notes. Bella realised suddenly that he must have spoken to a gathering like this many, many times before. "Happy New Year," he began. Several of the audience returned the greeting. Richard put his hands in his pockets. "This is a bit of a shock to me. As you probably know, I've been trying to persuade Bella Greenwood for a while now that I am a good thing. I'd got quite a nifty campaign planned out, to be honest. And then suddenly it's New Year, and I don't see the point of waiting. So I asked her, and she said yes. So..." He turned to her, and she put her hand in his and came in closer. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce Miss Isabella Greenwood, who has agreed to marry me. I'm a lucky man." The applause was spontaneous and seemed genuine. Julian Maddox stood up. "His Highness will take a few questions." Bella suddenly felt terrified, but the questions were friendly and easy to answer. The only difficult one was, "And how has Miss Greenwood's father taken it?" "From what I heard of the telephone call, he's, not dancing for joy," said Richard, with a great air of frankness. "We're going to have to work on that." God, he's cool, thought Bella. There were questions to her, which were easy too. Yes, Prince Richard had met her mother, brother, and stepfather, and they were all very pleased. A ring? Not yet. A present, then? Beside her, she felt Richard stiffen. She knew what he was thinking. Damn, we never thought of that. But she could handle it. She squeezed his hand to reassure him and told the lady journalist, "Well, he's promised me a limerick, but I'm not holding my breath." There was a shout of laughter. Before it had died down, the king rose, and Maddox made a sign to the stewards who had come in unobtrusively and were now lined up along the walls of the drawing-room, bearing trays of whiskey and champagne. "I would like to invite you all to drink the health of my son, the Prince of Wales, and his intended wife, Miss Bella Greenwood." The glasses were handed out with amazing speed. "Richard," boomed the king, not bothering with the microphone and sounding as if he was about to break into a happy dance. "Bella, my dear, your health." Everyone drank to the toast, and there was a prolonged applause, and Richard murmured, "Smile, wave, exit right, right?" They did. As the great doors of the drawing-room closed behind them, Bella broke into a tap dance. "I did it! I did it! My first press call, and I didn't knock anything over or poke anyone in the eye." "You were a model of decorum, and stayed upright throughout," he agreed gravely. "You're a natural." Bella stopped dancing. "No, I'm not. I'm a walking disaster. And there are photos of tumbling tiaras out there to prove it. But just this time it went right, and I didn't let you down." He hugged her. She hugged him back. Life doesn't get any better than this. It didn't stay as good as that, of course. It was one thing to charm a group of journalists and photographers who were in the same room as you, especially when you were giving them free champagne. It was quite another to convince hostile editors. Or, for that matter, the wildly partisan blogosphere. "Don't look," advised Lottie. "You'll drive yourself mad. The palace will get the news alerts and pass on anything that you should see." But Bella knew that there were people who thought the news was wonderful and were bubbling excitedly about the day, the dress, the honeymoon, as if she were one of their relatives. It was kind and friendly in one way, but in another it felt as if there were suddenly a load of people acting like they knew her, only she didn't know them. It's a bit like being a polar bear in a zoo, she told Richard. You don't get to stare back. Public property, he said with a sigh. I know. I'm sorry. No, don't be. So many people wish us well. I feel rather buoyed up by it. She was not so buoyed up by the paparazzi. They scurried after her, breaking out of alleyways as she walked to work, or appearing round shelves at the late market when she was buying milk. They're after the one iconic picture. You hitting a small child for one section of the press, you giving a puppy the kiss of life for another, explained Lottie. You are joking. No, I'm not. I've done my time spinning these things. It's part of what I do for a living. I know how it works. How long are they going to chase me? Lottie shrugged. Until somebody more newsworthy comes along. At the moment, there's a big premium on the princess-to-be. Sorry, you're going to have to live with it. At first, Bella's new employers didn't like it. They wanted press attention, they said, but not on the celebrity pages. But as their website began to get more hits, they decided that maybe it wasn't so bad after all, and became a lot less frosty. So that's all right, Bella told Richard when they were in the car going to a charity ice show. As for the media, as far as I can see, there are two schools of thought. Those who think we're a lovely couple, wish us well, and either don't care or are positively pleased that I'm not a toff. God bless them. Then there are those that hate me because I'm not a toff. They write these nasty articles, pretending it's about all sorts of other things. I'm too fat, I'm too thin, I'm grumpy, I'm overfamiliar, I'm a career woman and no support to you, I fawn on you sickeningly, and a whole raft of other stuff I forget. Hey, I thought you weren't reading them, said Richard in concern. I'm not now, but I wanted to know what all the noise was about. And now you do. She shrugged. Nothing I can do about it. If someone hates you, they hate you. They're not going to change their mind. There was a pause. Then he nodded soberly. That's a tough one, isn't it? Bella swallowed. Yes, it is. There's one blogger who scares me a bit. She's so spiteful. Richard was silent for a moment. Then he said, Loyal Subject 101? Yes, you've read it. Do you know who it is? Not yet, he said grimly. I've got people looking into it. Bella was doubtful. Can you do that? I mean, what about free speech? I can't stop her saying anything unless it's libelous, but, yeah, I agree. There's something about the tone of that one that is disturbing. So we're digging a bit. Oh. A wisp of cold touched Bella's happiness. Hey, don't look like that. It's probably some strange person who has fantasies about marrying me herself and wouldn't actually hurt a fly. Might not even be a woman. It's just a reasonable precaution to find out who it is. Yes, of course. He gave her a comforting hug. Mostly these things come to nothing. They fall in love with somebody else or go back on the medication. Or win a story writing contest or something. Bella smiled. I'll bear that in mind. Do that. I'll keep you safe. But if Richard was sympathetic about the nasty blogger, he just laughed when the Daily Dispatch, who had run the original falling tiara photographs for several days, called Bella a klutz and commissioned a number of cartoonists to envisage things that she might drop, break, or crash into. They're not as fervent as your father, but the Dispatch has never liked us since my father had its editor-in-chief escorted out of the royal enclosure at Ascot for pinching a waitress's bottom. Did he? Bella was fascinated. It didn't seem in character with what she had seen of the absent-minded king. Don't get him wrong. He likes to play the old buffer, but when he gets the bit between his teeth, he really goes for it. And he doesn't like bullies. I remember you saying your grandfather... Richard stared pointedly at the driver's head, and Bella stopped. So I'm afraid you'll just have to put up with the dispatch. If they weren't calling you a klutz, it would be something else. Price of joining the family. She didn't care about the family, but it was a price worth paying for loving someone as special as Richard, she thought. The more she knew of him, the more certain she was that he was right. They were made for each other. Nothing seemed to faze him. She regularly forgot to check out with the guardhouse when she stayed overnight at Camelford House, and he would receive calls from an irate security officer. He never lost his temper. Not with Bella, not with the guardhouse. Once she was late for a date because she got absorbed at work, and he forgave her. More, he made a joke of it. Yet she knew how tight his schedule was, and she could have kicked herself, especially as she was surrounded by a self-appointed support group. She sometimes wondered who Richard had who was there for him, not just for the Prince of Wales. She said as much to her grandmother. Georgia, who had come to the flat for an evening with Bella and Lottie, looked thoughtful. He has you. Oh, well, yes, obviously, but I meant someone of his own. His own? They were in the kitchen, and Bella was peeling potatoes. Georgia had a surprising weakness for English school food and requested shepherd's pie for a treat. But at her last observation, Bella put the peeler down and turned to face her. What does that mean? Georgia tried to dismiss the question. Oh, nothing. Don't start with the forest wise woman on me, said her granddaughter crisply. I know it meant something. Give. It's just that I suppose this engagement has all happened very fast. Bella was nearly dancing with irritation. Don't be enigmatic. I've had a long, hard day making sense of an illiterate PhD proposal. I'm in no mood for guessing games. If you think I'm doing something wrong, spit it out. Georgia laughed. I think you're doing just fine, dear. And then Lottie came in, and they started talking about important things, like saving the rainforest and how to get red wine out of a silk blouse. Later, as they were finishing their coffee, Georgia said, Have you talked about dates for the wedding? Lottie cast her eyes to heaven. Bella said hurriedly, Bit of a sore point, Georgia. The government wants us to get married in the summer, for the tourists, but the Queen thinks we should wait until after next Christmas. Negotiations, as they say, are ongoing. Georgia's brown eyes were shrewd. And what do you want? Richard's diary is the main constraint, really. He says a lot of people will be disappointed if he cancels engagements. So he's got his office analysing the forward plan. Lottie and Georgia exchanged looks. Not Richard, said her grandmother. You. Me? I'll fit in with... What? Both Lottie and Georgia had shrieked in protest. What? It's your wedding, said Lottie. You know, the thing little girls dream of from the first time someone tells them the Cinderella story. Big white dress, centre of attention, flowers in the hair, walking down the aisle with a dreamy look in your eyes. It's your day. Richard says it's everyone's day. We have to be... accommodating. Lottie snorted. We've been through this before, lots. It's a state occasion. There's no getting away from it. Richard and I aren't the only ones involved. Georgia always sat up straight. She said that was what Southern belles were taught to do. But suddenly she looked as dignified as the Queen herself. The shabby old armchair could have been a throne. "That is true, and you are very right to remember it. I am proud of you." She sounded as if she was summing up the case for the prosecution. "But saying there are a lot of people to consider does not mean that you are prohibited from saying what you would like." Lottie bounced on the sofa. "Right on, Granny." Georgia ignored that. She was very fond of Lottie and adored Bella, but she never cared to be reminded of her grandmotherly status. "Do you know what you would like, Bella?" "Richard says." Bella found 2 pairs of beady eyes daring her to go on. She ground to a halt. "I haven't thought about it, okay?" There didn't seem much point. Georgia fixed her eyes on her granddaughter with terrifying intensity. "Are you saying it doesn't matter what you want?" "Not in the scheme of things, no." "And if you told Richard that you feel like this?" Bella felt harassed. "Well, no. I mean, he's got a lot on his plate. It's not such a big deal, after all." There was a silence. Even Bella could see that this was probably not an ideal way for a bride to think about her own wedding, but she would never admit it. She put up her chin and broadcast dignified "keep out" signals right back at Georgia. To no effect at all. "While I do not agree with your father in all his anti-monarchical barnstorming, I'm coming to feel that, in this case, he has a point," announced Georgia. "I don't know if it is the fault of the royal family, the court, or Richard himself, but I'm very sorry to say," she didn't sound sorry, she sounded brutal, "that they have done a number on you, child." Lottie drew in a little hissing breath. "Have it, you foul courtier." Bella sent her an impatient glance, but Georgia ignored her. "Marriage is a partnership, not a corporate venture, Bella. You and Richard need to talk about this, and soon." "I love you, Georgia," said Lottie with fervour. "When you have done so, you may bring him to dinner. I will telephone you tomorrow with dates when I am free." Bella gulped. Georgia stood up and turned gracefully to Lottie. "It is always delightful to see you again, Lottie. I so enjoy our talks. Goodbye. Thank you for a lovely evening." Subdued, Lottie stood up, and they air-kissed. Bella said, "I'll call you a cab." "No need. I can always find one round here. If necessary, I'll go to Victoria Station. There are always cabs there." "I'll walk with you," said Bella firmly. She helped Georgia into her warm coat, a chocolate-brown, waisted, full-skirted thing with a discreet fur collar and military buttons. Georgia set her big Russian hat at just the right angle and pulled on fur-lined leather gloves. It was all very warm and practical, but, thought Bella, even for a domestic evening of shepherd's pie with the girls, her grandmother was catwalk elegant. Bella shrugged on her own coat, stuffed her keys in her pocket, and they went out into the night air. The street was deserted. Not a cab in sight. They began to walk. Georgia said, "Honey, I know you're getting a lot of advice from all over the place, and most of it is frankly crap. I don't want to add to that. I really don't. But I'm certain that you and Richard need to work out what you want before everybody else gets to have their say. It's just so easy to be taken over by the rest of the world. I was. And it took me half a lifetime to get myself straight." This was news to Bella. "I didn't know that," she said cautiously. "When you've made your bed, you lie on it," said Georgia dryly. "Old saying. No reason for you or anyone else to know. But believe me when I say talk to the man. I speak from experience." Oh, look, there's a taxi with its light on. I do so love London taxis. They're so big and solid and uncompromising, and you have room to spread out the skirts of your dance dress. Heaven. Just heaven. I have great hopes for you, Bella. On which gnomic utterance she raised an arm to hail the cab, kissed her granddaughter quickly, jumped in, and was gone. Chapter 17. The date. Royal Watchers Magazine. Bella did not act immediately on her grandmother's advice, not even when Georgia sent her a list of possible dates for bringing Richard to dinner. But she did think about it. Richard was on a brief tour of Middle European capitals in support of trade promotion. After that, he was going on to a skiing holiday in Andorra. He'd asked Bella to go too, but hadn't argued when she said that she couldn't start a new job and take a holiday after only a month. I can't duck out of this, he said apologetically. It's a family tradition. We go every year. We stay with my mother's cousins and take friends, including this year my goddaughter, who has a birthday that week. I can't disappoint her. Of course you mustn't cancel, said Bella, shocked. Include me when you book the next one. You got it. But later he rang and said, How would you feel about coming for just the weekend? I'd like you to meet everyone. So she left work at lunchtime on Friday and flew to Barcelona. She wondered if Richard would meet her there himself. She remembered how they'd fallen into each other's arms that first time at Waterloo Station. But a uniformed airport official picked her out while she was walking from the plane and led her through silent corridors to a waiting limousine, having her passport stamped en route. Thank you, she said. The official bowed. Our pleasure. We hope that you'll be very happy, you and Prince Richard. Good heavens! Thank you for your good wishes. I'm starting to sound like Georgia, she thought. The car took her to a substantial villa behind an even more substantial wall. There were a few sightseers and the inevitable photographers waiting in the country lane that led to it. Bella had learned the form now. She leaned forward so they could see her face and gave everyone her best smile. No waving, Lady Pansy had warned, not unless she was accompanying the prince. People wouldn't like her pretending she was royal before she was. So Bella kept her hands locked tight in her lap and beamed for Britain as gates swung silently open and the limo drove out of their sight. The people in the road waved like mad. It was a real physical effort not to wave back. Richard did come to meet her as the car arrived, though. He ran down the steps and kissed her, with a slight air of restraint. Lady P been getting at you too, huh? Muttered Bella. What? Nothing. She slipped her hand into his, and they went into the house. Tell me who's here. My mother is resting at the moment. Nell is on the slopes with the whole Linane family and our cousins. George is sprawled in the rumpus room, getting over a hangover. Still? Richard grinned. He and the younger ones went into town last night. Most of them came back around midnight, but Chloe tells me that George got into some heavy salsa action. Don't ask me when he got home. I don't want to know. Bella smiled, but said slowly, Chloe Linane's here. So the ditzy blonde who had looked at her with such hatred on New Year's Eve was included in the family party. Just great. Richard was saying, She's a fellow godparent to the monster, Tilly, which isn't really fair, but she's a cousin and should cough up for a birthday present anyway. That's why I'm so important, the monster tells me. All her godparents are relatives except me. I look forward to meeting her. You won't enjoy it unless you've brought her something, Richard warned. But she's very entertaining. He was right on both counts. In fact, Bella was surprised to see how cool, courteous, dignified Richard got down and dirty with the makeup kit of Tilly Linane's Suki doll. There is an irresistible appeal to a grown man sitting on the floor wearing pink lipstick and gold dust, she told him. Do you think perhaps some rouge on his cheeks, Tilly? Nice round spots, about the size of a 10-pence piece? His eyes promised vengeance, but he sat calmly while the small girl polished his face to a shining carmine. The child's mother, coming in with the Queen to put Tilly to bed, was taken aback. Queen Jane, however, was as charmed as Bella. Very nice, Tilly. I think he looks very handsome. Don't you, Bella? Stunning, she said gravely. His lips twitched. Do you think I ought to stay like this for dinner, then? Even the Queen did a double take at that. Bella, however, considered the suggestion. Could be a bit rococo for a simple family meal. He allowed his shoulders to droop. I'm really sorry, Tilly, he told his goddaughter mournfully. You're an artist, but supper is no place for your art. But she didn't mind at all. I can do it again tomorrow, she offered generously. Bella swallowed hard. Maybe it's time I changed for dinner, she said unsteadily. Good idea. I'll come with you. See you later, Mother, Nicola. Good night, Tilly. They escaped together. How do you get this stuff off? Hissed Richard as they ran up the stairs. Bella was bubbling over. No idea. That makeup is toy stuff intended for dolls. They're plastic. I don't know whether ordinary makeup remover will take it off skin. You might have to use a blowtorch. Alternatively, a good long session in the shower with an expert might do the trick, he said, whisking her inside their bedroom and locking the door. Let's go to it. They came down to dinner a little late, but very, very clean. The next day, everyone went off to the slopes. Bella didn't really like skiing and had only done it a couple of times, so she was glad to see that there were lots of easy runs and a relaxed family atmosphere to the place. The cousins, a dispossessed Grand Duke turned industrialist and his wife, were hospitable, and the Linanes jolly. Prince George treated Bella in exactly the same way as he treated his sister, giving her his spare stuff to hold while he shot off to buy a burger to fill the gap between mid-morning coffee and late lunch. What? I'm still growing, you know, he said when Princess Eleanor called him a greedy pig. I burn up a lot of energy. Not on the ski slopes, you filthy porker, she said, prodding him. They were clearly great friends, though Bella suspected that they were both a little in awe of Richard. Of course, he was 5 years older than George, 7 years older than Eleanor. It was a big gap, even if he wasn't also carrying all the responsibilities of being the Prince of Wales. Eleanor was not as cheerfully accepting of Bella as George was. She seemed friendly enough, but remained distant, almost as if she were embarrassed. That afternoon, the cause of this became clear. I'm glad that you're with Richard, Eleanor said awkwardly, when she and Bella found themselves drinking warm soup together, while Tilly proudly showed off what she had learned that morning. It's been a bit difficult. Everyone thought he was going out with Chloe again. Again? Eleanor looked surprised. You might not know, but he's been dating this Deborah person. We all knew it wouldn't last. She was always looking round for the cameras. When that finished, he took Chloe to some party, and then they went on to a nightclub. I don't know the details, but he had a little walk out with her years ago, just after he left university and before he did his year in the Navy. Eleanor looked up at the mountain. I don't know how serious it was. You know, Richard, he doesn't talk about his feelings, and I was only a teenager. But Pansy said that Chloe was waiting until he came back. And when he did... Deborah? No, nobody for a long time. Then there was Anastasia for a bit. Bella looked blank. Princess Anastasia, of Finland. She married last year. Big spread in royalty watches. Bella nodded as if she knew what Eleanor was talking about, whereas she had never heard of Royalty Watchers magazine until last year. Eleanor wasn't deceived. You don't know, do you? Okay. She was an art history major at Smith. Whenever he was in the States, he saw her, and then she came over here and worked for the National Gallery. Her father is on the Olympic Committee. Bella clicked fingers. Ah, got it. King Edvard or something. One of the bicycling royals, right? Eleanor choked with laughter. Coming up behind them, Richard took off his sunglasses and surveyed Tilly's composed run. She's not bad. What were you laughing about? Eleanor looked agonizingly embarrassed. Bicycling royals, said Bella crisply. It's rude to eavesdrop. What's wrong with them? I'll have you know that some of my best friends are bicycling royals. He put his arm round Bella and pushed his woolly ski hat further back. She saw that he had got rid of his skis. Ready to go? What about you? Don't you want another run? He shook his head. I've had my fresh air for the day. Anyway, Mother's tired. I thought we could go back with her. Sure. He drove with that controlled competence Bella was coming to learn he brought to everything. The Queen sat next to him, and she did indeed look tired. I will go and lie down for half an hour, she said when they arrived at the house. Let's have tea together in the conservatory at 3:30. I want to talk to you both before everyone gets back. What she wanted to talk about, it turned out, was the wedding. Your father tells me that the Prime Minister's office has a list of possible dates, most of them this year. It is your decision, of course, but I want you to think about it very seriously. Bella looked at Richard. Did he know this was coming? Richard was calm. I think we've got that, Mother. The PM sent the list of dates over in the second week of January. That's a fortnight ago now. Someone has been sitting on it. I know it's not me, and it doesn't seem to be Father's office, so it had to be you. What exactly is going on? The Queen folded her lips together. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. No, Richard agreed. Not angry, but not very friendly either. His mother flushed. I really wanted to get to know Bella, he said very coolly. No, you didn't. Have you even called her since the New Year? The Queen looked miserable. Bella felt sorry for her. So I repeat, what's this about? The Queen drew a long breath. This engagement, this affair, it has all happened too fast. You're still starry-eyed about each other, I can see that. I think it's lovely, but it's no foundation for your future life. She turned to Bella. You don't come from our world. Don't misunderstand me. I think that's a good thing. I really do. But it means that you have no idea what your life would be like if you married my son. Will, said Richard, with steely quiet. Will be like when she marries me. The Queen ignored him. All I'm asking is that you give yourself a year. You're his fiancé. It's official. You can be his companion anywhere you want. Just see what it's like. Bella leaned forward. I know he's public property. He told me so right at the start, and I've seen it with my own eyes. We don't have to wait a year for me to learn that. The Queen shook her head. And you do realise what it's going to be like being Princess of Wales? It's a job, you know. Richard will help me. The Queen drummed her fists on the arms of her chair. But that's just it. He won't. He can't. He'll be off doing his own programme. Do you know his diary already has events booked in for 5 years ahead? 5 years! When his grandfather died, it took the private offices 3 months to rework everyone's calendars. My poor George was launching ships. He was 11. My little boy, all on his own, in front of a horde of men in uniform, throwing a bottle at a damn great ocean liner. But his father said that someone had to do it, and George was old enough and liked the sea. Liked the sea. She fought with herself, drew several calming breaths. Richard watched her with dawning concern. He enjoyed it, Mother. He still talks about it. That's not the point. He was on his own. No, he wasn't. I wasn't there, she screamed, and banged her hand down so hard that dust flew out of the upholstered arm of the chair. There was a shocked silence. Bella said slowly, "This is about the children, isn't it? You're worried about our children." Richard drew a sharp breath. The Queen shook her head. "Not just the children. It's hard on them, but you can't imagine what it's like when you can't stop them being pushed onto the public stage when they're little. You feel so helpless." Bella remembered Richard telling her that the Queen had been good at protecting the family from the old king and his schemes. She looked at him now. He was very pale. She couldn't bear it. She said fiercely, "Richard and I will take care of each other and our children. I promise you." "I know you think you will, dear. We all think that. But the pressures never stop. In the end, you get so tired and lonely," she added, almost imperceptibly. And quite suddenly the Queen's eyes filled with tears. She jumped to her feet. "I'm sorry, this is your business. I never should have delayed that list. I'm sorry. Please talk to your father about it, Richard. Excuse me, I am not well." She hurried away, leaving a shocked silence. "Poor lady," whispered Bella. "Oh, Lord," said Richard. He looked at Bella. "What do you want to do, love? Sleep on it?" She thought about what Georgia had told her. It made a lot of sense. She took his hand. "I think you and I need to work out what we want before anyone else gets a vote." "Okay. And that is?" Bella looked at the little lines round his eyes, which always deepened when he was worried about something. He was being so careful not to push, not to put her under any pressure, to step back and let her take an independent decision. And yet she could see how desperately he didn't want to wait for a year. Well, neither did she. She knew that without any doubt at all. She slipped out of her chair and knelt beside him. "I love you so much. It's like being soaked in sunshine. I'd marry you tomorrow if I could." She watched the lines disappear. He gave a long, long sigh as if he'd put down a great burden. But all he said, in his practical way, was, "What about June?" Chapter 18. The Ring! Royal Watches Magazine. It was the start of a whirlwind that Bella would never have believed. The next week, Richard talked to the King and the Prime Minister, and they narrowed the date down to 3 possibles. Richard's office was on the phone to Bella every hour about some option or other until she longed to say, "Just do it. I'll go along with whatever you want." But, mindful of George's advice, she didn't, and they kept right on consulting her. And then the date was finalised, a press call scheduled, and the Queen called her at last. Summoned to an audience, Bella took another early departure from the office and recorded it carefully on the timesheet she had introduced when she took over. The one thing she didn't need, she thought, was some journalist claiming that the new princess-to-be skived off work. The Queen was on her own. As soon as the flunky had retreated and closed the doors behind him, she said, "I owe you an apology for our last meeting. I should never... All I can say is that it was with the best of intentions." "I'm sure it was," said Bella. "I'm certainly going to come to you for advice. I shall need it." "Yes, you will," said the Queen sadly. "So I suggest that Lady Pansy moves from her informal role as your friend and mentor to becoming your formal court advisor. You will want a personal assistant as well, of course. Maybe your little friend Charlotte Hendred, is it?" "You're very well briefed," thought Bella. Aloud, she said, "I wouldn't ask her to interrupt her career. But thank you, that's a good idea. I will start to look for one." The Queen smiled. "That's settled, then. And forgive me, I know that you young people like to be self-supporting, but this is rather exceptional. So the palace will pay. In fact, I suggest your team should use an office in St. George's Tower, where a lot of our staff are housed." More security, more forgetting to sign in and out, thought Bella, with a sinking heart. But there were some battles that were worth fighting, and some that weren't. So she said, "Thank you, ma'am," as if she were really grateful, and the office was set up. But before she could make her first visit to her new team, she had a call from Richard. "Can I take you to dinner?" "Any time." "When?" "Tonight." "Tonight? I thought you were at some trade fair." "Yep." "Don't tell me. You're tired of admiring machine tools and want me to come and massage your back. That would be a definite bonus." "All right, then. Where shall I meet you?" "I'll send a car," he said mysteriously. "It'll be at your office around 4, if that suits." I was looking forward to scrambled eggs on toast in front of a DVD. Of course it suits. Lovely. It was driven by Ian, though she didn't know the car. More important, nor did the 3 or 4 photographers who now camped regularly outside her office. Bella waved to them as she went past, forgetting Lady Pansy's precepts. She was nearly skipping along, delighted to be seeing Richard on the spur of the moment. "I'm going to see my love," she thought. "I'm going to see my love." Ian was waiting for her round the corner, as he had promised. She slipped into the passenger seat and he took off, heading for the motorway. "Where are we going?" "Richard said something about a picnic." "A picnic? In February?" Ian chuckled. "You haven't noticed the date, have you?" "What?" He jerked his head towards the back seat. "It's on the paper." Bella turned round and fished up his copy of the Morning Times. "February the 14th. So?" He sighed. "Look in the personnel column." "If Richard is sending me messages in the personal column, he never told me," said Bella indignantly. "I hate this business of his office talking to my office. It's just so artificial. Oh!" as she saw the columns of fond messages that made up the page today. "It's Valentine's Day." They drove for about an hour, then turned off the motorway and drove for probably another hour or even more, deep into mysterious countryside, full of stone houses, abrupt hills, tiny single-track roads and thatched pubs. "Are we going on a tour of Middle England?" asked Bella. "This feels like Tolkien country to me." But Ian just shook his head mysteriously, glanced at his watch and kept on driving. Eventually they turned onto an even smaller road, with a green countryside trail signpost. There were fields on either side of them, completely dark. The lane was deserted, not a house or light to be seen. It ended at a cattle grid and a 5-bar gate. Richard was leaning against it, dressed in a barber and jeans. "Is that a spare pair of Wellington boots?" said Bella suspiciously. "Jesus, it really did mean a picnic." She got out of the car. Richard met her, kissed her, handed over the Wellington boots as if they needed no further explanation, and said, "Thanks very much, Ian. See you in the morning." Ian grinned. "Fine. Well, good night." He drove off. For a moment there, I thought he was going to say, "Have a nice night," said Richard reflectively. By then, Bella was hanging on to him as she thrust a foot into the first Wellington boot. But at this she snorted and staggered, and Richard had to pull her upright. He held her firmly. "You are so rewarding to tease," he said, deeply pleased. She put on the other boot and he took her shoes, sticking one in each pocket. Clouds scudded across a black sky. The landscape was lit only by occasional shafts of light from a watery moon. Richard was carrying a torch, small but with a powerful beam. "We are going up the hill a little way," he said. "Hang on to me." She climbed over the 5-bar gate and went with him. It was not so long before she saw... "Is that a tower? I thought you'd appreciate an indoor picnic, given the wind chill factor." "You think of everything," Bella said politely. It was quite a small tower, just one room on each of the 3 floors. Inside he had lit a fire already, so the place was warm as toast. There was a tartan rug on the old flagstones with a rush basket laid in the middle of it. 2 folding picnic chairs were set either side of the fire. In one corner, at the bottom of the stairs, there was a small desk with an electric till and an array of postcards on it. "Should we be here?" said Bella uneasily. "It looks very municipal. We haven't climbed in illegally or anything, have we?" He laughed aloud. "I promise. The administrator knows we're here. He gave me the key and permission to park my car in the next field." "And the fire?" said Bella, still suspicious. "When was that chimney last swept?" "Do you know? I didn't ask." She relaxed. "Oh, all right then. If it explodes and burns us to a crisp, I shall blame you." "Do that." "Champagne?" She was surprised. Richard was a claret man normally, but he knew she loved the lightness and sparkle of bubbles. "Very spoiling. Thank you." She sat in one of the picnic chairs, and he opened the bottle and brought 2 glasses to the hearth. They toasted each other. It seemed as if he wanted to say something and didn't know where to start. This looked serious. "Why are we here?" Bella said at last. "I don't know if I've done the right thing. You may want to choose your own, but I've never given you anything personal. Not really. And I wanted this to be from me to you. Sort of private." He reached into the pocket of his barber and removed her right shoe, a checked cap, a tube of mints, and a jeweller's ring box. He looked down at it, swallowing. "If you... Oh, hell, here it is. I hope you like it." And he stuffed it into her hands as if it were a ham sandwich. Bella opened the little velvet box very carefully. Inside was a swirl of silver metal like a curly S, with a single lemon-coloured diamond set in the middle. It was very simple, and yet somehow heartbreakingly beautiful. It was also completely him, like that gorgeous plain apartment with all the light and the wonderful inlaid wood. "It looks like the wind," she said, awed. His breath came out in a rush. "You like it? You really like it? It's by a young designer. I've admired his work for ages. We talked about the design for a long time, and I said I wanted something that was free, that sort of flowed. This was the one I chose. We talked about gold, but I liked platinum better for you. You really like it? You're not being kind? Because you can choose your own engagement ring. You know that." She got up and kissed him. "I really, really like it. I love it. You're a genius." Richard beamed. "Terrific. That's terrific." He bounded to the stairs. "Now, come and look at the stars, and then I'll feed you." They ran up the rickety stairs. The tower, it seemed, had ramparts. From the top you could see mountains, valleys, the sparkle of water in the moonlight, little sleeping towns and great fields. The lower clouds had lifted, but there was still a dark roof of high cloud with a great gap punched through it, leading to the universe beyond where stars twinkled. Moonlight flowed down in golden swathes Bella felt she could climb. "Hello, Britain," said Richard, taking her hand and holding it high. "Here she is, then. My lady, and yours." Chapter 19. The dress! Royal Watches magazine. Of course, the ring had to be kept under wraps until the photo call at which they were due to announce the date and venue of the wedding. Richard suggested that Bella should take it home and wear it for a while, to make sure that it didn't need any adjustment. Lottie had stolen one of her gloves for him, but the jeweller had warned that only gave an approximate size. Bella was terribly tempted, but in the end she decided to be sensible. "I'm such a klutz, I might do something terrible like drop it down the loo," she said with a shudder. "You'll have to get used to it sometime," Richard said, amused. "But never mind. It can wait a week. I'll take it back and put it in the safe, if you like." She thanked him with fervour. So when she paid her first visit to her new office in the palace, she could honestly say that no, she did not have a ring yet. Lady Pansy was put out. "Haven't you at least chosen the stones? And have you decided what to wear for the engagement photograph?" "Goodness, no," said Bella. She'd been hoping to get in and out of the place in an hour, but Lady Pansy had a list of decisions to be made that would take most of the morning. Bella considered rebelling, but then thought better of it. It was not Lady Pansy's fault that she took everything at a slow march and paid attention to every detail. Besides, she was the Queen's friend, and had been part of the arrangements for the King and Queen's marriage 30-odd years ago, so she would know the traditions at first hand. In the interests of harmony, Bella sat on a sofa and made notes on her smartphone, while Lady Pansy worked slowly through several files. Clothes had a big file all to themselves. Bella would need clothes for lunch, for dinner, for formal balls, for attending the ballet. Her head began to reel. And then, of course, there were the clothes for the official photographs. The engagement photograph. A relaxed session in the country. No doubt Prince Richard had somewhere in mind. The going-away outfit. The entire honeymoon wardrobe. And the dress. The way Lady Pansy said that, it sounded as if the thing was some sort of alien being out of Doctor Who, thought Bella. The attack of the mutant wedding dress. She recognized incipient hysteria and calmed herself. "I'm afraid I've not really thought about a wedding dress. I've never been terribly interested in fashion, and with my year away I lost touch with even what little I did know. Lady Pansy beamed at her in a motherly way. I am so glad that you said that, my dear. It makes it easier for me to say. You will need a complete makeover in order to assume your royal role. I'm sure you realise that. Do I? Said Bella, who didn't realise any such thing. Having accompanied Her Majesty on so many of her trips, I am sure I will be able to help. Now for the engagement picture, a British designer, of course, nothing too avant-garde. You have to appeal to all ages and sections of the population, many of whom are very traditional in their tastes. Would you like me to have some samples sent round? Bella had a hair-raising vision of hours and hours spent trying on clothes, with Lady Pansy giving them marks out of 10, and said, no, thank you. She thought she could probably sort that one out. Lady Pansy did not exactly look crushed. She was too well trained in assuming that frozen courtier's expression, but Bella felt bad for her. So she said kindly, but if you would give me a list of the designers you think I should look at for the wedding dress, that would be a huge help. The woman inclined her head without cracking a smile. And perhaps you would take any that you particularly like, she offered. Lady Pansy thawed and said she would be delighted to do that. Bella made her escape before Lady Pansy could think of anything else for her to decide. She jumped into a taxi and called Lottie on her way to the office. Lots, I need fashion advice. You know me. I do indeed, said Lottie. The best bikini collection in the business, but otherwise your wardrobe is pants. I was living on a tropical island, for heaven's sake. Swimming was part of my job. Lottie gave a dirty laugh. Richard is still in for a treat I bet he doesn't expect. I probably won't be allowed to wear them, said Bella, suddenly depressed. They'll be too avant-garde for the British people. Oh, God, don't tell me there's a palace advisory note on bikinis, too. Bella choked. Haven't seen it. Anyway, that's ages in the future. I need something for this damn Photoshop next week. Where can I go? Any ideas? Yes, but I've got a meeting 2 minutes ago. I'll pick up some mags on the way home and we can talk about it later. It turned into a perfect girls' night in. Lottie had not only picked up a bag full of fashion and celebrity magazines, she had bought each of them a super new organic face mask and the raw material for mutual manicuring. And chocolate. This is the life, Lottie said, trying not to move her lips. She was lying flat out on the sofa in a toweling robe, with her newly washed hair wrapped in a towel, and a mask scented with orange flowers slowly setting on her face. How do you know when it's cooked? Said Bella, wandering in from the bathroom in her blue kimono. She was still applying hers. It came in a pot, like cream, only with raspberry pips in it. It turns pink, bright pink. About 20 minutes. Lottie lifted her wrist. I've got another 8. Bella put the pot down, cleaned her bepipped but sweetly scented fingers on a wet wipe, and settled herself in the armchair, with her feet on a leather floor cushion. She tipped her head back and stared at the ceiling. Do you remember when we were teenagers, Lots? We used to talk about our weddings. You wanted to be carried off from the altar by Carver Doone. A much misunderstood man. Lorna Doone was a fool not to marry him, said Lottie firmly. He was the villain. He was sexy. So basically you didn't want to be married, you wanted to be ravished. Lottie considered. No, I don't think so. I think I just wanted to drive a man mad with lust, preferably in front of all my friends and relations, including Jemima Crane from next door and Richard Gere in Pretty Woman. Of course, then they'd have to chase after us and rescue me, but hey, I'm a drama queen. What can I tell you? I don't think it was anything more sinister than that. I can't remember what I wanted. Lottie canted round on the sofa. You chopped and changed. You wanted to be married in a woodland glade in secret, I remember that. Oh, and you always had that picture on your wall, with that woman with long flowing sleeves knighting a handsome young man in chainmail. Bella wriggled. Oh, yes, the accolade. I can't remember the artist, but the woman wore the most gorgeous dress, with those long flowing medieval sleeves and all that golden embroidery. Oh, I'd love a dress like that. Lottie nodded enthusiastically. Actually, long medieval sleeves aren't a bad idea for a princess. Why not go with something like that? She looked at her watch and swung her feet to the floor. That's me done. Back when I'm excavated. When she returned, Bella said reflectively, Neither of us was really into trailing down the aisle in a big white dress, with a piss up afterwards, were we? Lottie peered at herself in the sitting room mirror. The skin is definitely softer, and there aren't any shadows under my eyes. I think this is good stuff. Bella yawned. Good, I'm nodding off here. You can't do that. We have bridal wear to nail. Lottie turned round and put her hands on her hips. Is it time to open a bottle? Bella stretched. Come on, you can't go to sleep. We must work. I saw Richard last night, said Bella dreamily. Got to bed very late. Good for you. Lottie had fetched a bottle and was applying a corkscrew with brisk efficiency. That's the idea. Concentrate on him. What do you think he wants to see walking down the aisle towards him? The curse of the mutant wedding dress. Bella told Lottie about her fantasy moment when Lady Pansy was boring on, and they both cackled. Lottie agreed. No, you don't want one of those gigantic meringue things that looks as if it could walk on its own. Walk, hunt, kill, intoned Bella. Very probably. How much did you drink last night? 1 bottle of champagne between us. Honestly, lots, I'm just tired. I've got 3 proposals which deserve funding, and I've only got the money for 2. I need some time to evaluate the comparison, and bloody Lady bloody Pansy rings me all the time about what colour stationery I want to write my thank you notes on. She leaped up, looking at her watch. Hey, I've gone over time. I'll be burned to a crisp. She scooted down the hall into the bathroom, and later could be heard swearing. Lottie poured herself a glass of wine and set about arranging the magazines round the floor, open at pictures she liked. Eventually Bella came back, watery-eyed. I got some stuff in my eyes when I was trying to get rid of the sediment, she explained. But you're right, my skin does feel softer. She poured a glass of wine for herself. I shall tell Lady Pansy, so she can start another sodding file. Face masks, brides for the use of. She plonked herself down on the rug in front of the fire and crossed her legs. So, right. Let's have a look at the meringues. But Lottie had opened all the magazines at photographs of day dresses. Tailored day dresses, floaty day dresses, knockout cream wool belted day dresses, skirts of all lengths, waisted jackets, loose unstructured jackets, almost a man's dinner jackets, and silky cocktail trousers with piratical silk sashes and high-collared shirts. Even multi-layered, grunge-with-attitude outfits, where you couldn't tell which bit went where. What are these for? The photo shoot next week. Remember? Oh, God, yes. Okay. Bella surveyed them all quickly. I like that, she said, looking at the cream wool stunner with a sigh. But I'd spill coffee on it or something. Lottie choked. Yup, you probably would. Anyway, it's a bit too sophisticated. Touch of the cougar, don't you think? They both contemplated the worldly expression of the stick-thin model. Bella nodded slowly. See what you mean. Anyway, I'm not really thin enough for it. Now I'm not starving anymore. I'm back to my normal weight. Good thing, too. So forget cream wool. It's strictly for people who don't eat, don't move, and don't carry cups of coffee. Any idea which designer you would like?" Bella broke off a corner of the giant slab of hazelnut chocolate Lottie had bought and sucked it thoughtfully. "Lady P says they have to be British." Lottie snorted. "Lady P is talking out of the back of her neck. Maybe for the wedding dress, or the, what do you call it? Trousseau? That's the word, trousseau. Sounds very 1930s, doesn't it? But in the next week's photo call, the press will want to see the girl Richard fell for. You as you are. Cinderella before the ball. Trust me on this." Bella took more chocolate in her agitation. "Bikini top, denim shorts and flip-flops? Come on, you can do better than that. You've bought some nice stuff since you got back. Have you looked through your wardrobe?" "There's nothing there. It's either suits for work or jeans. Or party dresses, and they won't do. Lady P always looks as if she's going to an ambassador's lunch. I reckon she thinks I ought to be the same. I don't think I can." Lottie was bracing. "Hey, you're a green-eyed blonde. You can look $1 million when you put your mind to it. Any ambassador would be proud. Do you actually like any of these looks?" Bella picked up the whole chocolate bar and hugged it against her like a hot water bottle, rocking slightly. Lottie took it away from her. "Chocolate and silk? Not a good look. Concentrate, Belle." Eventually, Bella stopped panicking and decided that she liked the lace cut-out top and trouser combo with fantastically high heels, and also a collection of very simple dresses in wonderful colours. "The colour needs to be darkish to show off the ring," she said thoughtfully. Lottie gave a crow of delight. "So that was what last night was about. You got the rock." "Come on then, give. Has he given you an heirloom?" "Better," said Bella dreamily. "It's platinum with a yellow diamond, and it's beautiful. Designed for me. Just me." Lottie sat back on her heels, her eyes wide. "Cool. I've never seen a yellow diamond. It's a good choice, though. You've got yellow flecks in those green eyes of yours. He must have noticed. Blue whites are too harsh, and emeralds would be too loud. Anyway, some people think they're unlucky. But a yellow diamond? Yeah, he's got class, your Richard." "So point me at an outfit which returns the compliment," said Bella, not dreamy anymore. "With pleasure." Lottie stabbed a finger at 3. "Not the lacy thing, too predatory. Buy it for a party sometime, though. Try the navy day dress, it's very elegant. A bit Mad Men, no? Or that green wraparound chiffon dress with the kicky skirt. It's got a great neckline, and the colour would be awesome for Little Miss Yellow Diamond." Bella agreed that both were worth looking at, and Lottie was a star. "And tomorrow I'm taking you shopping before you lose your nerve," said the star briskly. Sorted. After that, they creamed each other's hands and softened and trimmed cuticles, pared nails, and then, ceremoniously, painted each other's nails gold. And finished the bottle. The photo shoot was a breeze. She didn't even know what Mad Men was, and frankly it all sounded rather treacherous, so she had gone with the ivy green number. With her height, the skirt fell just on the knee, but was deemed demure enough by the powers that be, and it did show off the diamond beautifully. Bella loved her ring so much that she kept patting it and looking at it against different backgrounds. Each made it appear more perfect than the last. Richard was clearly delighted. The designer silversmith was there too, a shy, self-effacing man who only came to life when he talked about his work. "That man is coming to the wedding, isn't he?" Bella hissed to Richard when drinks were served and the posing and snapping were over. "If you want him to, of course. Put him on your list." "Ah. You have started a list." She winced. Not really. But Pansy said. It's not Lady Pansy's fault. She's given me a file and notes and everything. It's just that I'm struggling with competing proposals at work at the moment. Richard had that stony expression which she knew meant he disapproved. I'm really sorry, love. I'll do it next week. The stony expression did not lift. This week, I mean. I'll do it before Friday. That would be helpful. Ouch, don't go royal on me again. He looked down at her, startled. She put her head on one side, looking up at him naughtily. Remember what happened last time? The stony expression dissolved. Which reminds me, you still owe me one limerick. He could not help himself. He laughed aloud. It made a fabulous photo for the magazines, the two of them laughing together in a corner when they thought no one was looking. Tube Talk blew it up to a whole front page under the headline, So Happy and So in Love, and even the Daily Dispatch said grumpily that clumsy Ms. Greenwood must be doing something right. Only Loyal Subject 101 couldn't find anything nice to say about them. He or she thought the ring was a tawdry stunt, and buying an unbelievably expensive yellow diamond a slap in the face of the British people at this time of public austerity. The whole piece brimmed over with spite, particularly against Bella. Richard was angry, but Bella shrugged it off. You can't have everyone love you, or even like you. On the whole, I think our hit rate's pretty good. Forget it. We're doing okay. Richard nodded. I suppose you're right. So far, so good. But there was still the choice of the wedding dress to come, and that was turning into a nightmare. For one thing, Lady Pansy had not understood that Bella wanted to look at pictures and get a general idea of the styles of the various designers, since she didn't know any of them. Lady Pansy had telephoned 8 and commissioned original drawings. You mean I'm paying for 8 exclusive designs? Said Bella hollowly. She couldn't begin to guess what it would cost, but she was fairly sure that it would increase her student debt exponentially. Lady Pansy waved aside the vulgar consideration. They won't charge. It is a great honour for them to be asked. Of course, they will let their clients know that they are in the running. It doesn't seem very fair. I can only choose one, and they will have done all that work for nothing. Only an outline. They won't actually have bought any fabric or made anything. You're clearly not creative, said Bella. They'll have worked on it, eaten, slept, and dreamt of it. Raising their hopes like this is callous. It's not right. Lady Pansy stiffened. It's the way we always do things. Don't tell me, said Bella wearily. Tradition. But it was even worse when she looked at the drawings. They were all, every single one, huge-skirted, frilled, and fur-bellowed, with swags of pearls or bows of lace in every conceivable crevice. I'll look like a duvet cover while it's being changed, she told Lottie gloomily. Some right-thinking person will jump out of the crowd and try to beat the lumps out of me. It can't be that bad. You're being paranoid again. But after she'd looked through the portfolio that Bella had brought home, Lottie had to admit that it was not paranoia. They truly were frightful, said Bella. Not your style, amended Lottie. She peered at the signature on a crinoline so huge that it could probably double as an air balloon. Lawson? What on earth? He's the guy who usually sends brides down the aisle with the back of the wedding dress cut down to the bum. Known for it. It's his signature quirk. This thing has got a Liberty bodice sewn in. He must have gone mad. Bella clutched her hair. It's almost certainly Lady Pansy. She briefed them all. It has to be traditional. It has to please Middle England. It has to make me look like the biggest laundry bag in the world. Lottie looked at the drawings again and made sympathetic noises. She's the Queen's best friend. She's known Richard since he was in the cradle. They all love her, and they're certain she knows best. And I can't prove she doesn't because I'm letting it all get on top of me. Oh, God, lots. What am I going to do? Chapter 20. Bridesmaids and Vikings. Morning Times. Oddly enough, it was Janet who came up with the solution to the problem. She'd come up to town for lunch with Bella since it was, she said, the only way she got to see her daughter. Conscience-stricken, Bella booked a table at a small wine bar round the corner from the charity's offices. But, though her mother was in a determined mood, there was none of the reproaches that Bella was braced for. "Look, Bella," she said. "Kevin and I have been talking. I know that your father has washed his hands of the wedding. Has he even spoken to you?" Bella had to admit he hadn't. "But that's happened before, Ma. You know what he's like. And I was pretty rude to him." "Good for you," said Janet surprisingly. "It's your life. But anyway, Kevin wanted me to say he would be delighted to help out in any way. For instance, neither of us feels quite comfortable with the way the palace seems to have taken you over." Bella was startled. "Doesn't sound like you, Ma." Janet pressed her lips together. "I admire the royal family, but it does seem that they are riding roughshod over you sometimes. Whenever I speak to you, you have to break off to take a call from Lady Pansy in the middle of it. It seems to me you're rushing from pillar to post, trying to keep up with it all. So Kevin says what you need is a proper, trained personal assistant. He says that would take some of the strain off you, and he would like to pay for it." Bella was so touched that for a moment she could not speak. Janet began to look nervous. "Is that all right? We don't want to interfere. I just hate to see you looking so frantic." "Ma, you're wondrous. And Kevin is undoubtedly the best stepfather in the world. They did say they were going to employ me at PA, but in the end Lady Pansy just hired a couple of girls without consulting me, and they work for her in the office in the palace. Lottie helps me think and keeps me sane, mostly. And there's Carlos and everyone at the hair salon. But I know," said Janet. "Everyone's busy. So is that all right, then?" Bella nodded. "I'd be so grateful. I can't tell you." Janet looked delighted. "I'll tell Kevin. He'll be so pleased. Any chance of you coming to stay at all?" Bella consulted her schedule. These days she downloaded Richard's week first and then fitted her own activities around his. "Well, Richard's away on some school sports thing this weekend. I could come, though, if you don't mind just me." Janet brightened. "That would be lovely. It's beautiful at the moment. The daffodils are all out, and there are primroses along the river." For a moment, Bella had such a pang of longing it was almost physical. She loved London, but she was a nature girl at heart, and it was a long time since she had smelled the damp of impacted leaves and the sharp, clean scent of things pushing up through the warming earth. Spring was always beautiful in the New Forest. "Oh, yes, Ma, I'd love that," she said from the heart. "Good. I'll ask Neil and Val if they're free." "You won't get Neil. He's got his Viking thing on Easter Monday. He's training every moment he gets." "Well, Val, then. She seems much happier these days. And Georgia, perhaps? It will be just like old times." Bella put it into her schedule and copied it to Richard in his office. He texted back at once. "Good idea. Wish I could make it. Give Janet my love." She passed it on. They finished lunch and her mother went back to Hampshire. Kevin was on the phone within half an hour of Janet's departure. "Don't know if you have anyone in mind as a PA," he said gruffly, "but the head of HR here says that they could probably help. Young woman with small children, delighted to work from home, that sort of thing. If you would like, I'll send you her email. Don't want to interfere, though." Don't want to interfere. That's what her mother had said too. How different Kevin and Janet were from Richard's family, thought Bella, and then thought, no, it's not his family. Apart from Queen Jane's outburst in Andorra, none of them had even tried to interfere, and that had been much more about the Queen's own life than Bella's and Richard's. No, the interference, the plethora of petty details, the comments, the criticisms of anything she wanted to do, that all came from the blasted private offices via Lady Pansy, with Lady P herself putting her oar in at every opportunity. Were they making work to keep themselves important? Bella squashed the thought at once, but could not quite banish it. So she said to Kevin that she would be grateful for any help she could get. Before the end of the week, she had a friendly human dynamo in the shape of Trudy, mother of two and hotshot administrator, who was going spare at home while the children were busy with nursery school and playgroup. Within 2 days, she had set up a spreadsheet with a to-do list, plus target dates and notes of people to be consulted. She also gave Bella some shrewd advice. Lady Pansy is straight out of the quill pen era. Not her fault, but she needs managing. Bella gave a hollow laugh. But how? You have to preempt her. Be proactive. Set up meetings with her. Put them in the diary. Keep them short. Make her feel key to the whole process. But stop her picking up the phone every time she thinks of something else. It worked. Of course, Lady Pansy didn't like it. To begin with, she forgot to copy her messages to Trudy. But when she found that Bella rerouted all of her text messages to her new PA and kept her telephone permanently set to voicemail, she gave in. There was a difficult little meeting when she suggested, with great sweetness, that Bella was finding her new role too overwhelming. "Maybe you ought to move into the palace. I can mention it to Her Majesty. We are having coffee this morning." The prospect was hair-raising. Bella knocked it on the head fast. "That's very kind, Lady Pansy, but not necessary, thank you. I think I've worked out how to balance my work life with everything I need to do for the wedding. I'll review the situation with Richard in a few weeks. And this is how I see it working." She presented Lady Pansy with the new timetable. Bella would still go to the palace to meet her, but she would do it on a regular timetable. At 2 p.m. on Monday to review stuff that had come in at the weekend, and make any changes needed to the week. A quick catch-up on Wednesday at 5:30 p.m, the major review and planning meeting of the week to be 2 hours on Friday morning. With adjustment to her childcare management, Trudy thought she could generally manage to attend the Friday meeting. Lady Pansy was to pass any questions to Trudy, who would prioritise and manage, while Bella was at work. Lady Pansy knew when she had been outmanoeuvred. Her phone calls slowed to a trickle. Bella and Trudy spoke at lunchtime every day. "You need to pace yourself," Trudy advised. "Plan to do one thing at a time and stick to it. Wedding dress this week, bridesmaids the next." "Oh God, bridesmaids! I haven't thought about bridesmaids." "Next week," said Trudy firmly. Yet it was Richard who found the solution to the wedding dress problem. "Of course you can't have a dress you hate," he said vehemently. You'll be looking at photographs of it for the rest of your life. But tradition. He took her left hand and looked at the ring. We can set some of our own traditions. She searched his face. You're sure? Of course. Your mother had the full meringue, and so did your grandmother. He snorted. And my great-great, ever-so-great-grandmother wore a dress of total bling. Your point is? Bella was stunned. Bling? How do you know? I don't believe you. Would I lie to you? Look, I'll prove it. They were in his flat, padding around in early morning disarray. He went over to his desk and switched on the laptop. Look, here. Bella went and peered over his shoulder. He had called up a Regency sketch of a man in knee breeches and an elaborate jacket, leading a girl in a slim, high-waisted, low-cut dress with puffed sleeves trimmed with lace. Her hair had been screwed into a knot on top of her head, and she was not wearing a veil. Bella peered closely. Silver lame on net over a tissue slip, she read. It was embroidered at the bottom with silver lame shells and flowers. The manteau... Oh, I see, that was the train. The manteau was of silver tissue lined with white satin, with a border of embroidery to answer that on the dress and fastened in front with a splendid diamond ornament. She looked up. Heavens! She must have looked like a Christmas tree. Richard's lips quirked. Especially when you think of all the candles they'd have needed. He flickered his fingers. Glitter, glitter, glitter. What about going the whole hog and reviving the traditions of 1816, then? Bella kicked him, not very successfully as her feet were bare. He held her off, looking injured. Only trying to be helpful. No, you weren't. If you were really being helpful, you'd tell me who I should get to make the dress, Bella said with a sigh. She looked fondly at her ring. You have a really good eye. Haven't you got a favourite young dress designer as well? Well, I suppose I could ask around, he said doubtfully. But it's terrible bad luck, isn't it? I don't care, but a lot of people do. No point in giving the insects something else to exercise their mandibles on. You're probably right. I think my mother would worry too. She's quite superstitious. Oh well, back to the drawing board. Bella glanced at the screen again, and said wistfully, Did you see that they got married in Carlton House? Family and 50 guests, that's all. Those were the days. They had decided to marry in the cathedral. It was beautiful, of course, but not, as Bella said, human-sized. Besides, there was a huge echo. It made their footsteps on the marble floor sound like death treading ponderously up from the vaults to claim a soul. That was something she did not say. Richard knew she wasn't comfortable with it. He also knew, they both did, that there wasn't really an alternative. So now he gave her a quick hug and said, Look, what about a working party? What? Okay, so you can't see off the meringue party without support. So get some. What do you mean? How? Think who you would have asked if you hadn't have been marrying me. He winced a little at the thought. I just bet your grandmother has ideas about wedding dresses. He had responded to the summons to meet Georgia far better than Bella had dared to hope, especially as her grandmother had grilled him with ladylike thoroughness, and there had been several dodgy moments. The turning point had come, though, when Georgia, ramrod straight and acid sweet, said, Are you saying that you knew you would get my granddaughter the moment you saw her? Like buying a painting? Richard smiled down at her and said very gently, I love her, Mrs. Greenwood. I don't own her, and I never will. George's eyes snapped, and Bella held her breath. But in the end her grandmother said grudgingly, "Ah, you see that. Good." And in the car home Richard said, "It's not a word I normally use, but that woman is truly awesome. A Southern belle with fabulous manners and an interrogation technique that MI5 could learn from. And she looks like one of those classy old movie stars, Lauren Bacall or someone. And she's out saving the rainforest in person." He drew a long, astounded breath. "I thought your father would be great to meet, but wow! Just wow! I think I'm in love." So now Bella said teasingly, "You just want to meet my grandmother again." He nodded enthusiastically. "If we work the schedule right, I could even give her, all of you, lunch." Machiavelli. He laughed, not denying it, but said soberly, "Call her, Bella. Your mother, too. Every girl wants to consult her mother about her wedding dress, doesn't she? No one could criticize you for that. Maybe Lottie, too. Get them all in a room together, schmooze a bit, and come out with a better brief for the designers. Include Pansy and whoever she wants to bring along, just make sure she's outnumbered. She looks like a sweet little old lady, but Pansy can be quite an operator when she wants to be." "Thank you," said Bella, surprised and grateful. "That sounds like a plan. Have you any ideas about bridesmaids?" "Out of my league," he said with feeling. But Bella found an unexpected ally on the bridesmaid issue, and she didn't have to go looking for her. Princess Eleanor wandered into the Wednesday catch-up meeting with Lady Pansy and said, "Have you seen the daffodils by the lake, Bella? Do you fancy a walk? It's so lovely and fresh outside now that the rain's gone." Bella leaped up with alacrity, and as they wandered along the banks of the lake, her soon-to-be sister-in-law said, "Have people started lobbying you about being a bridesmaid yet?" Bella bit her lip. "Yes, it was a bit of a shock, actually." "Well, this is a bit of a cheek, but I'm lobbying too." "Eleanor, call me Nell, like the boys do. I've been thinking about bridesmaids since I was at school. All my little friends fancied being mine." She pulled a face. "So I've got some theories. Want to hear them?" "Very grateful," said Bella, touched. "You need your best friend, plus a sister or cousin or whoever, and a sister or cousin from the bridegroom's family. One small attendant. One to mind the small attendant. But the important thing is that they're your bridesmaids. Not your husband's, not your mother's, not your mother-in-law's. Yours. These women have to get you through the day, so you need to like them. Don't be blackmailed into asking anyone you don't want. If there's someone you absolutely have to include but can't face on the day itself, you can always ask her to your hen night." "Hen night," murmured Bella, committing it to memory. Something else she had forgotten. However, when Lady Pansy produced her big file labelled Bridesmaids and started to run through the daughters of the country's senior aristocrats, along with their family's service to the crown over the last 200 years, Bella was able to say that she had already decided who she was going to ask to be her bridesmaids, thank you. Lady Pansy stiffened, but Bella had run her choice past Richard, who had not only approved, but said, when he stopped laughing, "And you called me Machiavelli." So she knew she was on firm ground. "Princess Eleanor, she has already said yes. My second cousin Joanne, so has she. Tilly Lenane, because she's Richard's goddaughter and I think she's a sweetie. Chloe, because I know how big a part she's always been of the royal family's life, as you are yourself." Lady Pansy inclined her head graciously. She seemed taken aback, but pleased. Definitely pleased. So while she was preening, Bella slipped in the news that would make Lady P as sick as a parrot when she started to think about it. And my best friend Charlotte Hendred will be my chief bridesmaid, of course. So if you would just find out from Tilly Linane's parents and your niece whether they're happy to trot down the aisle after me, we're sorted, I think, Lady Pansy. Of course, said Lady Pansy. She looked sandbagged. Yes. Result. With that, the arrangements went swimmingly. After consultation with the king, the press office organised a bunch of interviews and think pieces. I told them to leave you alone to get on with it, my dear, the king told Bella, when she and Richard joined the rest of the royal family for supper one cool spring evening. I said to Julian Maddock, I like her style. She's got a good head on her shoulders and she's very well behaved. Unlike some, he added with a dark look at Nell, who pretended not to see. We'll send her a minder along, of course, and you must ask for any advice you want, but basically be yourself. Very charming, very charming. With the royal seal of approval, it seemed Bella could not go wrong. Even Lady Pansy stopped arguing, though the high-level talks on the wedding dress nearly changed that. It was Lady Pansy, of course, who arranged the conference room and the coffee and the palace, so she decided to take the initiative and invite 4 of her favourite designers to come too, in the afternoon, to present their ideas. You did what? Said Bella, aghast, arriving before her support group. Lady Pansy was affronted. Time is ticking away. You need to assign the contract today. Having the top 4 here will save time. Not altogether, of course. You can talk to them in turn, she said kindly. Bella was tight-lipped. You knew quite well that this was to be a planning meeting only. This is not helpful. Get rid of them. But even her grandmother, when she arrived, said that it would be bad form to uninvite them at such short notice. So Bella gave in. She was still seething, though. However, the discussion itself was very useful. Everyone had a different perspective. Bella realised she wouldn't have thought of half the points on her own. Janet said the most important thing Bella needed to think about was being comfortable. She would be standing a long time. She would have to move a fair amount, step backwards, go round corners, up steps, kneel, and stand up again. You have to feel that you can move in the dress without having to brace yourself every time, pet, her mother said earnestly. There's so much to do at a wedding. You want to be able to put your dress on and forget about it. Lottie was the self-appointed look of now expert. She set up her laptop and delivered a PowerPoint presentation of some of the options, given current fashions. She had cleverly produced images of Richard and Bella which were to scale, and transferred dresses across to slot on to the Bella figure. Every time anyone stopped speaking, Lady Pansy broke in with what the Queen had worn at her wedding, the Dowager Queen, Richard's aunt, the Princess Royal. She described the dresses in loving detail. They were all clearly meringue on the grand scale. Bella said clearly, Thank you, Lady Pansy. We have understood the precedents very clearly now. She was not seething any more. Her indignation had cooled to an icy determination to stop Lady P in her tracks. She stood up. So let's get this out of the way now. I will not go down the aisle to meet Richard wearing some vast crinoline that makes me look like the dame in a provincial pantomime. It's not my style. Please, everyone, strike that option now. She sat down. Lottie applauded. Lady Pansy was temporarily hounded out of sweet superiority and glared with fury. Bella ignored her and turned to her grandmother on the other side of the conference table. "Georgia, you haven't said anything yet. What do you think?" Georgia considered. "A wedding dress makes a big statement, and you need to remember what the back of it says. The photographs will all show the front. But in the church—" "Cathedral," put in Lady Pansy loudly. They all ignored that. "In the church, everyone will be looking at your back throughout the service. That young man who likes to design backless wedding dresses seems to me to be asking the congregation to join the bride in, well, almost deceiving the bridegroom. Sneering at him, even. I'm sorry, Lottie. I don't think they're very kind." "Hadn't thought of that one," said Bella cheerfully, her temper restored. You could always rely on her grandmother to come out of left field. "Okay, Georgia. Dress must be kind. What else?" Lady Pansy snorted audibly. "Of course, it's all about the way line and colour are combined. Something very white and severe could say, 'I'm not for touching,' for instance. Myself, I think that some of those boned tops which cut into the flesh look as if the bride is constrained, in a straitjacket, if you will. Not comfortable and not free." Lottie laughed aloud. "Well, that's knocked out the collections of at least 3 designers I know, Georgia. That's narrowed it down." "If you want my advice, Bella dear, I think you have to consider the message you want to give the congregation. And more important even than that, the message you want to give your husbands. He's the most important person there for you after all, isn't he?" "Yes," said Bella, feeling her ears go pink and knowing there was not one single thing she could do about it. "Yes, he is. Good thinking, Batwoman." But if the discussion was a success, the beauty parade of designers was not. Once they grasped that meringue was out, they pitched hard for their own most recent collections. Bella sat there with a frozen smile on her face, feeling it was more and more hopeless, until eventually one man said, "Everything happens around the bride. A wedding is a picture, with the church and congregation as the frame, and the bride the blank canvas to which I apply the image of the day." There was a brief flurry. Suddenly Georgia was on her feet, elegant and deadly. "May I clarify something?" she said very courteously. "You just said that my granddaughter is a blank canvas." He did sense danger, but not enough to sidestep it. "Just for the purposes of the day," he began airily. He was stopped dead in his tracks. "You are a very silly man. You do not know how to do your job. Please leave." That was when things changed, Bella thought afterwards. Up till then, the press had either loved her or given her the benefit of the doubt. Even the grumpy Daily Dispatch hadn't actually attacked her. But soon there was a rumour that Bella had told favourite of the Stars designer, Jonas Crump, that he was a silly man who did not know how to do his job. And the backlash started. It wasn't all bad. The Morning Times did a very nice piece about her family, including Neil's upcoming appearance as a Viking, and ran a profile of her bridesmaids on their weekend supplement. A charities magazine did an evaluation of her first 3 months at the forestry project and said she was hard-working and inventive, with really sound hands-on experience from her time in the Indian Ocean. The women's pages were generally pleased when she chose a younger designer, Flora Hedderwick, to design the dress. But Loyal Subject 101 said she was a control freak with an ego problem, who didn't care about British trade, the royal family, or even the Prince of Wales. And other bloggers started to creep out of the ether, repeating the same story. "Bloody nonsense," said the king, storming into Lady Pansy's office while Bella was there one Wednesday. He was in a fine temper, and knocked over a small table stacked with files as he fulminated. Lady Pansy, leaping to her feet, did not know whether to curtsy or rescue the files, so did a sort of wild salmon writhe until the king said, "Oh, sit down, woman, sit down." This grumpiness was so unlike him that Bella was astonished. His colour was high too. "Are you all right?" she asked him. "Bastard reptiles," he said, not answering directly. "All they want to do is to tear into people. Never mind who gets hurt. You carry on, my dear. You tell the truth, and if they don't like it, tough." He turned on Pansy. "And if any of them ask you, it's no comment. Right?" And he stamped out, leaving Lady Pansy curtsying behind him. "I do think," she said in the soft, patronising voice that Bella was coming to loathe, "that it would be a lot easier if you were to move into the palace, where you could be guided more, Bella dear." "Bastard reptiles!" floated back down the corridor. Bella's lips twitched. "I think I've got it about right as far as His Majesty is concerned," she said, and left with a spring in her step. If only she had known. She spent Easter with the royal family at the castle, and after lunch on Sunday, she and Richard drove down to Devon to cheer on Neil and his fellow Vikings the next day. The fields were full of green shoots, and a brilliant spring sun made the budding trees look as if they had been studded with tiny emeralds. They had a perfect evening in the grounds of a small village pub that led down to the river where the longboat was due to land the next day. In fact, they were sitting there in the scented dark when Neil arrived, looking harassed. "We've got a problem, sis," he told Bella. "Our celebrity has broken his hand, careless bugger, and we're one oarsman short. Can you call Lottie? She said she'd try and get one of the Richmond lot to come along. At this stage we can live without a celebrity, we just need someone to pull an oar." Richard stretched lazily. "I can pull an oar," he remarked. Neil said, "I haven't got her number. I've looked everywhere. He did a double take. "I can pull an oar. I was in the second eight at college. Of course, it wasn't quite Viking style." Neil said eagerly, "But you were pretty good when you were playing around that weekend." And then, No, you can't. We haven't got a costume for you." "What happened to the celebrity's costume, then?" "I mean, we haven't got a costume for you." "I don't think Viking raiders had Prince of Wales feathers on their seal coats," said Richard dryly. "I'm up for it, if you are." And of course he did brilliantly. His springy hair kept pushing off his Viking helmet, so it had to be held on with elastic, but otherwise he looked the part fantastically. And when they came to land, he swaggered up with the rest of them, bare-chested and with a distinct glint in his eyes. "Sexy swine," said Bella, going to meet him along with all the other wives and girlfriends. "God, you smell good." There was a lot of laughter and making faces at the camera, but the wind had got up, and soon enough the mighty oarsmen decided they could do with T-shirts. And the T-shirts carried the logo of the sponsor, a handcrafted biscuit manufacturer. It was on the internet by nightfall. Prince of Wales in advertising scandal. And there was Richard, in the green and white T-shirt, with a tankard of ale in his hand and one arm round a laughing Bella, advertising Morgan's Ginger Thins. Some said he was stupid and drunk. Some said he was stupid and calculating. Some said he was stupid and did what his bride-to-be told him to. Of course, every version of the story started with the fact that his fiancée's brother was the reason Richard had become a Viking in the first place. Bella's phone rang all the time. It felt as if the thing was vibrating with rage. Richard was inclined to shrug it off. It's bad luck about the sponsorship, but as long as Morgans don't try to cash in, which would be very silly of them, I don't think anyone else will care. For long. The proceeds go to sailing for the disabled, after all. And I had a bloody good time. End of. Only then his father heard about it. By midnight the king was in hospital with a suspected heart attack. Richard suddenly went very quiet. A helicopter was scrambled to take him to London. "I'll come with you," said Bella, but Richard shook his head. He looked pale and drawn, but he was his usual calm self, contained, in control. Bella had never felt so far away from him, not even when they fought. "Better not," he said, as politely as if she were a stranger. "Someone has to drive the car back to London." "You want me to do that?" "If you wouldn't mind." "Oh, my love." She went to put her arms round him, but he evaded her embrace without really seeming to see it. "I'll call you." He doesn't want me, Bella thought. He blames me. And he's right. It's my fault. Neil would never have agreed to let him in the boat if it weren't for that silly game, rowing on the carpet at home before Christmas. She swallowed. "Yes, do, please. Call me as late as you like. I won't go to sleep until you do." "Yes, okay," he said, only half with her. "Got to go." A kiss? Barely a kiss at all, really. And he was gone. Chapter 21. When one thing goes wrong. Tube talk. Bella drove back very carefully the next day. She hadn't slept much. Richard had rung to say that his father was in the King George IV Memorial Hospital for officers and seemed to be stable. The doctors weren't really sure what was going on. They'd done a blood test and results suggested a minor heart attack. According to his valet, he fell asleep over the television last night and then woke up and suddenly started talking scribble. That could have been because he was still half asleep, but it just might have been a small stroke, which is what's worrying them. Maddox said he's been short of breath a lot lately. And also there were a couple of odd episodes this week when my father seemed very anxious about something. But Maddox didn't press him and it seemed to pass. Classic symptoms of a mild heart attack, apparently. He's being monitored round the clock at the moment. Anyway, the quacks say it isn't life-threatening, though he needs to be careful. "How are you?" "Me?" Richard sounded drained, but impeccably polite, as always. "I'm fine. The emergency was all over, pretty much, by the time I got here. My mother is shaken, though." Bella just longed to be with him, to hold him. Somehow she couldn't quite bring herself to say it. She did say, "What can I do?" He puffed out his breath as if he were trying to think of something for her to do to make her feel better. "Bring the car back to Camelford House. I'll make sure the guardhouse are expecting you and don't play any of their stupid tricks." She knew he would too. Even when he was so tired he couldn't see straight. Even when he was desperately worried about his father, he would make sure that she did not have to lock horns with some Jobsworth who wanted to show her she didn't belong there. She thought her heart would break. "I'll see you tomorrow, then." "What? Oh, yes, tomorrow. Thank you." He was obviously about to put the phone down and added conscientiously, "Good night. Thank you for waiting up." She did not know how long she sat there with tears falling silently. She loved him with all her heart, but in his distress She could not get near him. It was like walking into a wall. Bella did not know Richard's big car very well, had only driven it a couple of times before to move it in car parks and so on, but she was a good driver, steady and unflappable, and the tears had dried towards dawn. She delivered it safely to Camelford House by mid-afternoon. It was Fred, one of the nicer security men in the guardhouse, when she put her head round the door. "Afternoon, Miss Greenwood. How's His Majesty?" "On the mend, we hope, Fred. Has Prince Richard got back yet?" "Been and gone, miss. He's over at the palace with the private office. They'll be rearranging diaries, I reckon." Yes, of course. She shouldn't have needed a security officer to tell her that. "I'll just go, then." "Right you are, miss." He took the keys from her, and Bella wandered blindly out into the London streets. Should she join Richard? Would he want her? Or would she just be another burden that he had to carry and be polite to, in addition to everything else? There was only one way to find out. She half expected it to go to voicemail, but he answered his phone after only 3 rings. "Bella? Where are you?" "Back in London. They tell me you're at the palace. Shall I come over? Or—" "Yes," he said with urgency. "Yes, come now. That would be— yes." A flunky escorted her to a room she hadn't seen before. It was long and thin, with several desks with slightly outdated computer screens on them, and wall-mounted clocks showing the time in Ottawa, New York, Kingston, Jamaica, Paris, Rome, Delhi, and Canberra. Richard was standing at a long folding table. It reminded Bella of a pasting table she had seen decorators use in her mother's house, with 3 other men looking at a huge roll of paper. He glanced up when she came in and surged towards her, almost lifting her off her feet with the strength of his hug. "I'm glad you're here," he said, too quietly for anyone else to hear. "So glad. I wished I hadn't gone off last night the moment I got into the helicopter. I wasn't thinking straight." "You were worried. We both were." "What's this?" He took her hand and led her towards the table. "My father's schedule. He doesn't hold with computers. He likes to see it mapped out in front of him." It resembled nothing so much as a giant campaign plan. It was even colour-coded. One of the blocks of colour started in 3 days' time. She looked at it hard. "But that's—" "Australia," said Richard levelly. "Yes. My father and mother were due to fly out on Thursday on the first leg of an Asian Pacific tour. 6 weeks away. They'd get back just over a month before our wedding. It's out of the question now. The king has to be under medical observation for at least a month." "You're going to cancel?" He held her hand very tight by his side. "No, can't do that. I will take over their schedule. Nell will accompany me to Australia and fulfill my mother's program there. My mother may join us later, depending on my father's rate of recovery." "So you don't want me there?" "Oh, I want you, all right," he said, with such bitter weariness that she had to believe him. "I just can't have you. It's not done. It's not protocol. God help me. You're not royal yet." "They'd be getting a substandard product." He gave a snort of laughter and immediately looked better for it. "Yeah, I suppose. So, I take over my father's diary. George is supposed to be studying, but he doesn't have another exam this year, so he can take over mine. He's cleared it with his supervisor." "Maybe you'll help out." "Me? Even though I'm not royal?" "Always helps to have a bit of skirt, though," said a voice from Richard's other side, and Bella realised that her future brother-in-law was among those present. He lurched round Richard and gave her a hearty kiss. "We'll keep the world on its toes while you're away, Magister." That was when she realised, truly realised, that Richard was going away, and she would be left on her own, and knew that she would not make a fuss. It would only make things worse for him. Yes, sure. I'll stay here and keep on with the pre-royalty arrangements, counting down to the wedding. And I'll phone you every night. I'm banking on it. They spent Richard's last 2 nights in England together. He sat up late at his desk, working through things, sometimes typing at the computer, sometimes staring into space, thinking. Bella brought him a drink, or coffee, or once cocoa, because he said he couldn't remember what it tasted like. So she pulled on her outdoor clothes and slipped out to the late store attached to the big local garage, and came back with a tin of cocoa, sugar, because she had never seen any in his kitchen, and enough milk to sink a battleship. She made it carefully and then frothed it up as a treat. He was writing again, but turned at her arrival by his desk. What? Cocoa? He stared at the mug in her hand. But we haven't got any cocoa. I've never seen any in the palace. I didn't even know it was still made. Late-night garage shop, she said smugly, and it is made by me. Taste it and see if it's sweet enough. He inhaled the aroma first. Oh, heavens, yes. I must have been about 6 the last time I had this. He tasted, and a look of bliss came over his face. Then he lowered the mug. What is it? Bella said. Too hot? Too cold? Needs cream? What? You, he said in an odd voice. Me? Yes? You. Think about me. So? You don't understand. Lots of people take care of me, smooth my path, give me things. But that's their job. Or else they're being polite to my father's representative. You think about me, and then go and do what you see I want. Yourself. She stood quietly in front of him, her hands by her sides. Of course, she said softly. He leaned forward and rested his head against her. Bella stroked his hair. She could feel all the worry and effort and alertness drain out of him, and he stayed there, just being in the moment for the longest time. Eventually he stirred. You're wonderful, he said in a matter-of-fact voice, as if it were so obvious it was just something you said to remind yourself, like check door key or turn off iron. Bella felt her heart would spill over, it was so full. This, she knew, would carry her through the next lonely 6 weeks without him. It would have to. Chapter 22. The Hen Night. Daily Dispatch. Richard was due out on a mid-morning flight from Heathrow on Thursday. He and Princess Eleanor were travelling on a scheduled flight, albeit first class, of course. Neither Richard nor Bella slept very well the night before, though neither of them mentioned it, nor did they know that the other was in the same state. They were both awake early, though Richard's manservant had packed his bags and sent them over to the palace the day before, from where the whole party would leave. Walk with me before I go, Richard said quietly. There was a hazy mist over St. James's Park, and the lake was as still as a mirror. Office workers were already striding through the walks, on their way to their offices in Whitehall or Piccadilly or the Strand. It seemed that only Bella and Richard had time to stop on the bridge and look at the ducks. I'll take you to Sydney another time, he said with sudden passion. Any time you say. They wandered on, beneath cascading fronds of young willow, catching the faint, warm scent of crocuses in the air. "You'll be all right. George will help. He can be a prune, but his heart is in the right place. Of course I'll be all right. I'm an independent woman. If I can survive Francis and the fish, I can survive anything." His fingers almost crushed hers. At last Bella said reluctantly, "We're going to have to go. You know what the office is like about punctuality." "My poor love. You're learning the hard way, aren't you?" They turned their back on the fantastic skyline of Whitehall and the London Eye and strode out for the palace. Queen Jane had insisted she was going to see her children off at the airport. She had dressed very carefully in a trim scarlet coat worn with a black pillbox hat. This was a cheerful woman, you would have said, who had no fears at all for her husband's health. But when you got close, you saw how thick and careful the makeup was, how strained her eyes. "You look very handsome," Bella said involuntarily. "My grandmother Georgia would say that coat was giving a message of good cheer." There was an indrawn breath from Lady Pansy and a couple of others in the assembled entourage. "Oh, bother," thought Bella, remembering Lady Pansy's folder on how to address their majesties. Page 1 said, among other things, "Don't address them unless their majesties speak to you first." Page 2 covered subjects which should never, ever be raised with their majesties. High on the list was their personal appearance. So 5 minutes here and she'd broken 2 rules. Well done, Bella. But although the Queen looked surprised, her tired eyes smiled. "Thank you, my dear. How kind of you. I certainly hope so." Bella was all set to travel in the second car with Princess Eleanor, and was even moving towards it when the Queen stopped her with a gloved hand on her arm. "No, you go with Richard, Bella. Stay together as long as you can." They drove in a convoy through central London. As well as the 2 royal cars, there were also security cars in front and behind them, and motorbike outriders. All through the city, traffic stopped and drew to one side to let them through. 6 months ago, Bella could never imagine such progress. Now it didn't seem to matter. She held Richard's hand tightly all the way there. The journey didn't take long. They didn't speak. At the airport, they were driven to a small VIP room, where quiet, efficient officials completed passport and flight formalities painlessly, and then the 2 limousines drove out onto the tarmac and came to rest beside the waiting plane. Everyone got out. Bella could feel her throat thicken with tears. This was crazy. It was 6 weeks, for God's sake, and Richard had much more to worry about than she had. Not just the trip and all the briefings he would have to catch up on as he went along, but his father's health too. She had seen how genuinely fond he and his father were of each other, though neither of them ever expressed it, of course. I must not make a scene and make this harder for him, she thought. She said brightly, "I want lots of photos and a kiss a day." He kissed her formally. But there was a smile in his eyes that was worth all the repressed sobs in her chest. "You've got it." He and Eleanor went up the steps, turned at the top, and waved. But not to me, thought Bella, suddenly desolate. This one is for the cameras. When they had disappeared, and the cabin doors were being closed, the Queen turned to Bella. "Ride back to town with me." As soon as they set off, the Queen pressed a little button, and a soundproof glass partition slid up between them and the chauffeur. "My dear, I wanted to say how grateful I am for the support you have given us all, especially Richard, over the last few days. It cannot have been easy." Bella did not think she could say anything without blubbing like an idiot, so she just made a vague, "You're welcome" gesture. "Quite," said the Queen, understanding. "You behaved beautifully back there. I was very proud of you. Proud of you both. I know this is the worst time for you to be apart. I'm just so sorry that the circumstances—" Bella couldn't take any more. "How is His Majesty?" she said swiftly. The Queen smiled. "Not very pleased with life. He feels fine. But the doctors won't release him until they know what happened. He says he's become a lab rat and is being difficult about blood tests. The doctors have all my sympathy. He's on fighting form." "That's good news." "Yes. Now I wanted to ask you whether you would like to move into the palace soon. With Richard away, and the wedding approaching." "Oh, Lord," thought Bella. "Is this my punishment for encouraging him to play Viking and promote Morgan's ginger thins?" She said in a small voice, "I'm very happy sharing a flat with Charlotte Hendred." The Queen looked as if that surprised her. "Are you sure? Don't the paparazzi make a nuisance of themselves?" Bella grinned. They stood around outside the block of flats for 5 days and saw Lottie and me leave to go to work every morning and come back from work every night, except for Saturday, when we brought food and went to our parents. They got bored. The Queen smiled perfunctorily. "That might change now." "Now? Why?" "While Richard's away, they will be watching to see who you amuse yourself with." For a moment, Bella didn't understand. "Catch me two-timing him, you mean?" "Not necessarily. They'll be more interested as it gets closer to the date, anyway. And with this unfortunate business of the promotional T-shirt—" "I knew it. This is my ginger thins punishment." Queen Jane smiled. "No question of punishment. That was entirely Richard's own fault, and so I told him. But we thought that after that incident, especially with him away, you might find yourself a little exposed." Bella was certain that "we" included Lady P. Interfering old bat. She said carefully, "You may be right. Can we see how it goes?" "Of course, my dear. I only want to help. Just remember that if the pressure becomes too great, there are always rooms at the palace for you. We can protect you, you know." The only pressure, thought Bella, was Lady P and the meringue party. But she did not say so. She thanked the Queen warmly instead. "I narrowly escaped incarceration today," she told Lottie that evening. "With Richard gone, Lady P made her move. The Queen invited me to live in the palace." "Cardiganville," said Lottie, who had rather taken against Lady Pansy at the great wedding dress round table. "Oh, worse than that. It's cold and dark, with acres of corridors, deserted except for some pictures of men in uniform or killing animals. The cardigan sphere is quite cosy by comparison." "Cardigans can suffocate you, though," said Lottie darkly. "Now listen. I need to talk to you about the hen night. What do you want to do?" Bella cheered up. She hadn't had a really good session with her girlfriends since they all went off to Greece the summer after college. She had seen a couple of them since she got back from the island, but she had been so absorbed, between Richard and job hunting, that there were at least half a dozen girls she had still to catch up with. "Going back to Greece would be nice," she said now, wistfully. "Do you remember that terrace?" "Yeah, brilliant. But I'm not sure it's practical for a weekend. Don't forget, Nikki and Sarah are on first-year teacher salaries." Bella nodded. "I know. And it would be a hassle banging through airports and things. Besides, Lady P would probably set the press on me if we went outside the UK. We must support British trade, Lottie chuckled. Well, I can do you a very nice cowboy bar in Newcastle, complete with booking bronco and a rugby club down the road. Bella's eyes popped. You're not serious? Yup. Girl from work had her hen night there. We all took turns on the bronco. Fell off, threw up. Bella, who had been on 4 hen nights so far and thought she knew the form, was impressed. One hen always throws up, but the whole flock? Every last woman. And then they cleaned up, came back and tried again, and then danced till dawn with a couple of cowboy strippers. They make 'em tough in the north. They were both silent, contemplating the enviable stamina of other people. So do you fancy it? Bronco busting? Maybe not. Thought not. I'm getting together with Joanne sometime this week to sort things out. Anywhere you really want to go? Anything you want me to veto? Bella smiled. I trust you. Okay, then. A judicious combination of silly and togetherness. I can do that. And so she did. Or at least tried to do. It all started very well. Joanne had found a small spa in West Yorkshire, newly opened in a down-at-heel, not quite stately home. It was inexpensive enough for even the tyro teachers to afford, and 15 of them turned up on Friday night. They had a lovely morning walk, ending at a local pub, then lay around talking and taking massages and facials. Bella had been given the master suite, which was pretty impressive with a 4-poster bed and balcony, and they all congregated there. 3 of them sprawled on the bed with the others dispersed about the room, while they advised Joanne on the use of a borrowed set of hair straighteners and discussed the evening to come. And then the whole event was overtaken by an irresistible force, in the form of the Honourable Chloe and Princess Eleanor. For form's sake, Lottie and Joanne had to ask along the 2 bridesmaids from Richard's side. For form's sake, they'd had to accept. But Nell had only just got back from New Zealand, where Queen Jane had taken over by Richard's side, and Chloe had a Friday night party to go to. So they said they would drive down together on Saturday afternoon, in time to hit the local town for dinner. And when they arrived, it rapidly became clear that these 2 were going to party to the max, and were absolutely determined to take everyone else with them. Right, people, said Nell, for whom 3 weeks of enforced good behaviour had been too much. Let's get the rules straight here. The photos will be incriminating, you will be drunk, you will be sweaty, and you will wear false eyelashes, she said to Chloe. Anything else? Chloe said, RM. RM, right. Nella tapped the side of her nose. How could I forget him? Anyone who doesn't snog a random man gets locked out. They both collapsed in giggles. Oh, my lord, muttered Bella, sitting bolt upright against the 4-poster bed's rich crimson bolster. What have they been drinking? Let's hope it's just drink, said Lottie grimly. Whatever it was, its effects didn't abate. Instead of going for an Italian meal, followed by a spot of karaoke, the group found themselves whisked through some rudimentary tapas onto a whistle-stop tour of every club and dive in the place. There were more than Bella expected, and some of them were pretty rough. The sort of places where you went in and danced and kept your nose carefully blocked against the prevailing smell of last night's clientele. Eventually, they ended up in a dungeon of a nightclub. Chloe, who was barely coherent by then, ordered vodka with sambuca chasers for everyone. Bella had looked forward to the prospect of trotting around town with brightly dyed feathers in her hair in the company of friends in a similar state, but now she was stone-cold sober and starting to feel seriously uncomfortable. She managed to lose her drinks behind a giant cocktail card and signalled Lottie. I'll give it 30 minutes tops and then I'm off. Nell will pass out before then, said Lottie knowledgeably. And indeed, she was wobbling dangerously on her platform heels and grabbing any man who passed, almost certainly more for support than RM reasons. I can't stand much more of this, muttered Bella. It's no fun, and Joanne looks as if she's going to cry. But Lottie was made of sterner stuff. Don't be a wuss, Bella. Someone always cries on a hen night. That was true, and Joanne had only one or two of the 3 classic reasons to cry. She had just broken up with her boyfriend, and she had been at Bella's christening. You were a lovely baby, she said, smearing her mascara terminally on Bella's handkerchief. A lovely, lovely baby. I so wanted a sister. You're as good as a sister to me. I love you, Bella. I've always loved you like a sister. Yeah, you said. Thanks, Joe. I love you too. Beautiful baby, said Joanne, who was at that stage of inebriation where the sufferer thinks that if they keep on plodding around the same track again and again, they will find the slip road off and get away. There was a stag do at the other end of the club, which now decided to join forces with the girls. Chloe Linnane announced that she was going to snog all of them, and did. It took some time. The guys accepted the challenge enthusiastically. A tall hockey player came over, plucked Bella out of her corner, danced her round in a fast Latin number, and ended up throwing her over his arm, trying to suck her face off. Bella extricated herself. Thanks for the dance. I'm just going. Oh, come on. The night is young. But Bella had caught sight of a commotion at the bar. Nell, having run out of snoggable men in the stag party, had wriggled round behind it and was trying to grope the hot young bartender. He was nice about it, but put her firmly out of his way by sitting her up on the counter. Only from there she scrambled to her feet and strutted along the top of the bar. Already unsteady, she skidded in the spilled drinks and shot the entire length of the bar on her bottom, skirts and huge platform shoes flying. Then she fell off the end, landing in a tangled heap, and lay there, laughing like a maniac. Bella said, Right, that's it. I'm taking her back to the spa. Lottie had a fleet of taxis on standby. She called one up, and between them, she and Bella bundled Nell home. When they got there, Nell flung herself flat on the bed and passed out. She was terribly pale, and there was a sheen of sweat over her face. I'd better stay with her, said Bella, worried. In fact, I might even call a doctor. That doesn't look normal to me. Nell opened her mouth and began to snore. That's normal, said Lottie. But sit her up if you must. She was mixing her drinks like a sailor, and she must still be jet-lagged too. What a numpty. Numpty indeed, thought Bella, sitting with her as the night grew colder and the snores did not abate. She was so tired and her head hurt. She was also angry. She'd been looking forward to her girls together weekend. It wasn't fair that these 2 idiots should mess it all up. She was even angrier when she came down in the morning to find 2 unshaven photographers perched on the low wall round the car park. The nightclub had not been dark enough. The entire stag party had taken photos of the goings-on with their phones. The Sunday Dispatch had completely changed its front page to print them. Bella didn't know which made her feel more sick. The one of Eleanor skidding along the bar, or the one of her bent double over the arm of a very fit bloke being, apparently, kissed senseless. She stamped upstairs to Eleanor's room. The princess was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking as if she would not easily move. Get dressed. We're going. You're a pain in the butt. Eleanor moaned. I'm going to be sick. That's the least of your worries. The stately homeowners did their best to keep the marauding flocks of photographers and journalists at bay. In fact, one of them came upstairs and said, "There's an underground passage to the gatehouse. We cleared it for the children, so we know it's safe. Do you have someone you could trust who could pick you up there?" "George will help you," Richard had said. "I'll see," said Bella. She called George. He hadn't seen the papers. He was barely awake. But he grasped the situation at once. "Okay, I'll be there. Directions?" Fortunately, he was less than an hour's drive away, staying with friends. Lottie was her usual practical self. "Leave the packing to me. Stay in Nell's room. I'll tell everyone you were worried about her colour last night and took her off." "Won't Chloe Linnane come to see her?" "Bloody Chloe never came home last night. If she turns up, which I doubt, I'll get her off the premises. Confiscate Nell's phone, by the way. You don't know what she might send." "Good thinking. I don't trust her. She was out of her skull last night." Bella found Nell's phone in her tiny pink crystal-studded handbag and pinched it. Nell was sitting in a chair with a wet towel over her face by then, and didn't notice. It was a bit of a struggle to get her down to the kitchens in order to access the passage, because she kept saying she wanted to go home. But in the end, Bella managed it. George called them when he was approaching the gatehouse, and barely had to stop while Bella pushed Eleanor into the back seat and got in beside him. "Drive," she said between her teeth, "before I kill your sister." From the back seat, Eleanor moaned. Bella's sense of humour returned momentarily, or before she throws up all over your motor. He drove like the wind. Chapter 23. Will he call it off? Sunday Dispatch. Bella was still in the car when Richard called. She expected fury, or that deadly royal chill, but it was worse than that. He just sounded tired. "How could you be so thoughtless?" he said. "How could you? Nell is barely more than a child. My mother and I are out of the country. My father has a heart murmur. You just don't think." Bella looked over her shoulder at Eleanor, now slumbering heavily. She looked about 12. "It just got out of hand, that's all. I know it's a mess, but these things happen." "Well, you'll have to clear it up," he said flatly. "Julian Maddock is talking to the press officers. The internet has gone crazy, and there's some very nasty stuff out there. He'll be in touch with you. I strongly advise you to do what he says." "Of course." "Where are you now?" "On the road back to London, with Nell. George is driving us." "Well, that's something, I suppose. Don't go to Camelford House. Take her straight to the palace. I'll call Pansy." Bella flinched. "And when you get there—" "Yes?" "I know you don't want to, but this is non-negotiable. You move into the palace and you stay there. Or I'll issue a statement that the engagement is off. I mean it, Bella." She felt numb with shock. "I can hear you do," she said through frozen lips. "So do it." He rang off without saying goodbye. It was dreadful. Julian Maddock was quite kind, to Bella's surprise, but Lady Pansy could barely contain her triumph. It came liberally coated with more in sorrow than in anger, but triumph was what it was. Eleanor kept to the room that had been prepared for her, and a nurse sat with her. Nobody told Bella what, if anything, was wrong with the princess. Nobody told Bella anything much, until George came over to see his sister before dinner and dropped in to see Bella afterwards. She was sitting in the window seat, trying to read a mystery and failing to keep her mind on the blood-spattered corpse. "How's it going?" said George, sliding round the door like a murderer himself. Bella wondered if he had been told to keep away from her contaminating presence. She wondered if Richard had told him that. "I'm fine." "How is Nell?" "She's thrown up. Just as well, or I think old Jones would have stomach-pumped her. She's lying in bed with the duvet over her head, sulking, which means she's ashamed of herself." He wandered round the room, which looked as if it had been furnished by Lady Pansy. There were pictures of men with guns, coupled with china cabinets full of King Charles spaniels and pirouetting columbines. It made Bella feel crowded and faintly ill, but George seemed completely at home in it. He said, "She's a pill, but it's not all her fault. When people give you a role, you sort of play it, you know." "A role?" "The three of us. Good boy, bad boy, wild child. They've been calling her that since she was 13. People believe it." "But surely—" And then Bella remembered the cartoon she had seen before she even met Richard. The royal family is the 7 dwarfs. That was it. What had they called the children? Dim, Ditzy, and Dull? She'd believed it, hadn't she? "I'm sorry," she said, ashamed of herself. He shrugged. "I get to play the clown. Not a problem. It's tougher on Richard, who does all the dull stuff and never, ever gets drunk, or goes on the razzle, or even does his own thing. At least, not until he met you." "Me? You have no idea what a bit of freedom you were. For all of us, including Nell and me. You gave us hope. But why? Surely Richard does everything he wants to. The Queen says he's very strong-willed." "The good boy," said George. "He'd give up anything if he thought it was his duty. He was a fine sailor, you know. Really gifted. Might even have had trials for the Olympics if they'd let him carry on with it. Only Mother said it was too dangerous, so he gave it up. My father didn't stop him. He gave it up. It's as if he's trying to kill off everything about him that isn't public property," said Bella in a small voice. "Yep, maybe. Then he started parkour. Do you know what that is?" She shook her head. "Sort of free running. You try to cross the city without touching the ground. Very gymnastic. Lots of vaults and springs and swinging from your hands. He was really good. He still watches it on YouTube sometimes. It makes me so mad. He should be doing it." "He told me he liked climbing buildings," said Bella, enlightened. George cocked an eyebrow. "Really? As if he still does it?" She said carefully. "As if he plans to do it, certainly." "That's the best news I've heard in years." "Let's hope he sticks with it." He brightened at a thought. "If you can get him into a horned helmet, hauling an oar with a bunch of weirdos, there might still be hope for him. Power to your elbow, Bella Greenwood. Power to your elbow." But there was no sign of Richard breaking out. Even when he and the Queen came back from their tour, he and Bella never got their old intimacy back. Partly, of course, it was because he insisted on her living in that barracks of a place. It didn't feel quite right, sleeping together in the great echoing palace, with servants popping out of the doors when you least expected them, and the king at one end of the building and the Queen at the other. But he could have kissed her as if he meant it, talked to her properly, even taken her out somewhere. He didn't. He was just courteous and considerate, and desperately busy. Whenever he saw her, he made it clear that he was on his way somewhere else. He couldn't even spare half an hour to walk round one of the parks with her. The only sign of emotion he gave was when she said quietly, "Richard, I don't know what's gone wrong. This can't just be about the hen night. Do you want to end the engagement?" He looked at her as if she had stabbed him. It was the only hopeful sign she'd seen. And at once he said tonelessly, "If that's what you want, then of course." Bella said, "No, it's not what I want. How can you think that? Remember what we used to be like." She went to him. His hands came out to her for just a moment. Then they fell to his sides and he stepped back. It was like a slap in the face. She stood very still for a couple of seconds, mastering herself. Then she said quietly, "What has happened to us? Is it something to do with your father? Surely he's better. He seems terrific." The king, alone of the family, seemed to be in tearing spirits. He had lost 1.5 stone, started jogging round the palace grounds, and had thrown himself back into his official engagements with a will. He looked, in fact, like a man who has been on holiday. Unlike his elder son, who looked so fine-drawn you could see the skull under his skin. Richard said formally, "He's very well indeed. The doctors are very pleased with him." He looked at his watch. "Now, I'm sorry, I'm overdue at the cathedral. The prior is talking about a rehearsal, but I'm saying it's too soon." And he was gone before she could stop him. It was only afterwards that she thought, he is going to the cathedral without me. What is going on? Of course, it was probably because of the paparazzi. The telltale photographs had come from cell phones, and the newspapers had tweaked and enhanced them in-house. But the paparazzi didn't find her boring anymore. Whenever she stepped outside, they homed in on her like wasps round a jam jar. "Do they think I'm going to throw myself into the arms of some passing hunk?" she asked Lottie irritably, having run the gauntlet of their cameras in order to have her hair done by Carlos, followed by supper with her friend. "What do they think I am?" "Desperate," said Lottie frankly. "What? That's how you look. Tense and haggard as if you hadn't slept for a month. And you're losing weight again too. Have you been dieting after that silly photo?" "What? No. What are you talking about?" Lottie blushed and apologised. "I was thinking of that photo the mad person put up on their blog. Loyal Subject, or whatever they call themselves. It was you standing on the cliff when the boys were doing their Viking thing. There must have been a stiff breeze because you're leaning backwards, but it blows the front of your waterproof out, as if you've got a bit of a tummy. A few of the nastier bloggers were calling you podgy." Bella shrugged. "I didn't see it. I don't look at the internet much. The press guys send printouts to Trudy, but she says it's just depressing how badly written it all is. So I don't see it." "Oh, well, good. So you're not dieting to look like a skeleton? It just happened?" Bella flushed. "I know. I'll do better. But it's almost like being in prison lots. They want me to work at home too. Well, I can do that. Project evaluation is a solitary activity. I don't have to go into the city to sit at a desk and do it. But I liked the desk and the office, and going round the corner to meet Ma at the pub for lunch." Lottie made sympathetic noises. She said she couldn't envisage a life in which you couldn't go round the corner to the pub. Bella smiled. But her smile swiftly died. "Everywhere I go I have a palace minder in case I get drunk and fall over, and a security officer in case somebody else does. I said I wanted to buy some new knickers, and they asked Marks and Spencer's to stay open, specially for me. I'm impressed. Don't be. A great shop like that with nobody but me and a few palace watches in it. creep me out," Lottie said awkwardly. "Belle, do you think... could they be trying to scare you off? Freak you out by showing you what it's going to be like being Mrs. Richard?" Bella nodded slowly. "I thought of that, but I don't see the point. I told him we could break it off, and..." She drew a long breath. "He didn't want to. He looked horrified. No, the one thing I'm absolutely certain of is that he still wants to marry me lots. But in her heart, she wasn't certain at all." Chapter 24. Good to go. Tube talk. And then, out of the blue, her father rang. "Bella!" he yelled. He always yelled as if he were in the midst of the Siberian wastes, even if it was only Clapham Common. Bella felt her heart lift. Finn was a meteor, whizzing at top speed and possibly destructive, but he always sizzled with energy. "Hello, Finn, where are you?" "I'm staying with your brother. He's worried about you. We're coming to see you. Time we broke you out of the Bastille." Maybe it was Finn's renegade influence, but quite suddenly Bella had had enough of being a ladylike prisoner, with Lady Pansy vetoing her every choice and all her friends unreachable on the other side of the palace's curtain wall. "No, I'll meet you," she said decisively. "St. James's Park, on the bridge, today at 4. Lady Pansy, a creature of habit, took tea with the Queen at 4 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and while Lady Pansy was away, Bella just walked out. Nobody stopped her. The policeman on the gate didn't even question her, just tipped his hat. "Why didn't I think of doing this before?" she thought. "I must have been going stir-crazy in there. I could have walked out any time I wanted." She walked gently round the park, smelling the honey and musk of the early roses, savouring the great blousy displays of annuals in the beds and the lush green grass. It felt good to have the warm air on her face again. At last Bella felt she could breathe. She got to the bridge at 4 o'clock exactly. Finn wasn't there. Par for the course, thought Bella tolerantly, and leaned over the railing, watching a family of ducklings show off their prowess at swimming in a straight line. Except for the tail-end Charlie, who kept getting distracted and was endlessly shivied back into line by his father. She laughed aloud. "That doesn't sound too bad," said a voice. And she turned, and there was Finn, disreputable whole jeans, appalling old lumberjack shirt open to the waist, several days' worth of beard, and in a Cobra hat. He raised his hand, which was the closest he ever got to giving anyone a hug. Live long and prosper. He was also a fan of cult TV. How could she have forgotten that? Bella was so pleased to see him, she grinned from ear to ear. Her phone started to ring. She switched it off. This was Bella time. No one else was muscling in on that. "Finn, it's good to see you. You look a complete down and out." He took it as a compliment and preened like one of the ducks. "Got back 2 days ago. Went straight to Neil's. That Viking stunt of his looked good fun. Sorry I missed it." "Well, stick around. He may do it again." I might stick around to see you married too. How do you feel about that?" Bella thought about Finn slouching into the cathedral and coming face to face with Lady Pansy. She could have danced with glee. "Oh, yes, please, Dad." Suddenly her eyes were brimming over. He blinked. She never called him Dad. "Hey, no need to cry. If you want me there, I'm up for it. I'll even walk you down the aisle if you want." His tone said it would be an enormous sacrifice. You don't have to go that far. Kevin has offered, and he actually doesn't mind wearing a morning suit. Finn gave a sigh of relief. A great chap, Kevin. Always said so. Now, walk round this pond with me and tell me what's wrong. To her amazement, she did. Finn, who normally found human relationships both difficult and boring, listened with unusual attention. In the end, he said, "You know, something seems to have happened to this chap of yours. He hasn't had a blow to the head or anything, has he?" "No," said Bella with a tearful chuckle. "Well then, you'd better ask him what's going on," said Finn. "Because sure as hell something is." "I don't see what it could be." Finn raised his eyes to heaven. "God, this is why I can never live with women. They go off into corners and think, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Ask, woman. Ask." Bella hesitated. "Call him now and I'll buy us both an ice cream." She laughed. "All right." She switched the phone back on, and at once text started whizzing across the screen. "Well, tough." She called Richard. He picked up so fast it was like a cat pouncing. "Bella! Oh, thank God. Are you all right? Where are you?" "I'm in St. James's Park," she said, "looking at the ducks, in front of the ice cream stand. Look, you and I need—" "Stay there, he said urgently. "Don't move. I can see you. I'm coming to get you." Bella let the phone drop, her mouth open. Her father called out something. She turned to him, shaking her head. "What?" "I said..." And out of the bushes pounded Richard, Prince of Wales, and hit him. Actually, he felled Finn by the unscientific but effective method of knocking him behind the knees and then jumping on him. "What the fuck?" gasped Bella. "It's okay," said Richard with a knee in Finn's back. "I've got the bastard. You're safe." "Safe?" Bella glugged, but no words came. Finn made some protesting noises. "Shut up," said Richard, so fiercely that even Finn shut up. Richard pulled out his phone. "It's okay. I've got her. She doesn't seem to be hurt." He looked at Bella, his face haggard. "You're not, are you?" She shook her head. "She's safe. Now come and arrest this bastard before I wring his neck." Bella got back the power of speech. "What are you doing, you thug?" she shouted. "Get off my father! Get off my father now!" Richard stared at her blankly. "Your father?" Bella calmed down somewhat. "The man you are sitting on," she said very precisely, "is my natural father, Finn Greenwood." Richard got off his victim automatically. "But he shouted at you. Abuse. I heard him." Bella turned to her father, who stood up, spitting grass and rubbing the back of his hand across his mouth. "What did you shout, Finn?" His eyes crinkled up at the corners. Say what you like about footloose and irresponsible, Finn was good at riding life's punches. "I said, chocolate, vanilla, or coffee flavour," he repeated mildly. "I take it you're my intended son-in-law. Good to meet you." Richard shook hands on autopilot. Down the path came two security officers. One, Bella saw, was Ian. "What's going on?" she said. He came panting up to them. "Are you out of your mind?" he yelled at Richard, entirely forgetting the respect due to the Prince of Wales. "For all you knew, he could have been armed." "Exciting," said Finn, mildly interested. This was the sort of human interaction he could handle, thought his daughter fondly. Plenty of action, none of the soppy stuff. Richard rubbed his hand over his face. I thought I'd lost you," he croaked. He pulled Bella into his arms. heedless of his prospective father-in-law, security officers, ice cream vendors, and a tribe of interested mothers and children who entirely forgot to feed the ducks. He became aware at last that everyone was staring. Oh, God. Let's get out of here. I still have Lottie's key, said Bella. She was torn between bewilderment, relief, and sheer spitting fury. She definitely didn't want to go anywhere royal just at the moment, and was quite prepared to say so. Nobody asked. So they went back to the Pimlico flat and Bella brewed tea. Richard went into the kitchen with her. God, I've missed you, he said. Looking at his face, Bella could believe it. He had dark grooves around his mouth and his eyes looked haunted. Much of her fury dissipated. She touched his poor, tense mouth, and he seized her hand, kissing the palm and holding it against his cheek as if he could not quite believe she was there. Bella lost the urge to yell at him. On the other hand, you've been keeping me in the dark, she said levelly. You've got to stop that, you know. I'm a grown-up. She tugged her hand away. I know. But you were in danger, all because of me. If you hadn't met me, if I hadn't chased you, it would never have happened. You'd have had a safe and happy life. So it was my fault. Besides, I had to keep you safe. Do you see? Yes, she saw. She went on making tea, putting mugs on a tray. But why didn't you just tell me? I didn't want you to be afraid, he said simply. She snorted. Great, just great. So you put me in prison instead? He winced. I didn't think. No, you didn't. And you don't seem to think that I can either. Marriage is a partnership, Richard. She took the tray through to the sitting room while he held the door for her. Right, she said. I want to know what's been going on. All of it. Ian and the other security officer looked at Richard for guidance. Bella could have screamed. But he nodded quickly, and she decided to let it go. There's a blogger we've been watching for a while. He's particularly hostile to you, Bella, said Ian. The profilers say he is fixated on Richard. The threats get worse every time you two are seen together in public. So that's why Richard had been keeping away from her. Idiot. But she didn't say it aloud. Not yet. It could wait. Richard said, I thought that if you went to live in the palace, you would be safe. And you were. But it's made you look like a ghost. And so sad. When you asked me if I still wanted to marry you, I nearly stopped it. But, well, Loyal Subject 101 was still out there. Still is. Since this hobo isn't our man. He gave Finn a complicated look, somewhere between apology and irritation. Well, at least he'd got over hero-worshipping her father, thought Bella, suddenly amused. That was a good sign. What sort of things does the blogger say? She asked. Richard recoiled. You don't want to know. She just looked at him. Oh, very well. Some of it's vile, and some of it's just stupid. Like saying you looked fat because the wind was blowing up your wind cheater, or that you dressed like a frump because you wore some terrible striped dress to the New Year ball, which you didn't even wear. He tailed off. Bella? She had sat bolt upright. He said I was going to wear a striped dress. Yes. She went into her old bedroom and brought out the striped horror. This one, I imagine. Everyone stared at it. I never saw you in that, said Richard slowly. No one did except Lottie. She was here when it was delivered. Some dressmaker must know about it since she made the damn thing. But the person who gave it to me was Lady Pansy. There was a moment's silence, as they all assimilated the implications. Then Richard surged to his feet. And that Judas is having tea with my mother right now, Come with me. He seized the dress as they went. When Bella and Richard burst into her sitting room, the Queen was looking tired. Not surprisingly, thought Bella, who recognised one of Lady Pansy's interminable monologues when she walked in on one. "Shut up!" said Richard ferociously. Lady Pansy did. "Richard, dear," said the Queen, alarmed. He flung the striped horror into the middle of the carpet. "Trapped by your own spite, Pansy. If you hadn't tried to make my Bella wear the ugliest dress in the world, you would never have given yourself away. Mother, this loyal lady-in-waiting of yours is loyal subject 101. The Queen went pale. It was clear she knew about the mad blogger. But she said bravely, "That has to be nonsense. Pansy?" Lady Pansy said nothing. She didn't have to. Guilt was written all over her face as soon as she saw the dress. Ignoring the Queen, she turned on Richard, the horse face suddenly ugly. "You had no right to marry that," she said. "You had to marry someone with breeding, with dignity, with a history of service to the royal family." "Yada, yada, yada," said Richard, suddenly a lot less dignified than Bella had ever seen him in front of other people. "Shut up, you poisonous parasite! Shut up!" Lady Pansy screamed then, and went on screaming. It took a couple of the security officers waiting in the corridor to subdue her, and then a doctor to sedate her ravings. The Queen was distraught. Richard called his father. When the King came hurrying in, Queen Jane was standing in front of the fireplace, wringing her hands in agitation. "How could I have been so mistaken? How could I? She always seemed to be my friend. Why didn't I see? Your poor Bella, Richard. I've been so blind." The King stepped over to her, stilled her frantic hands, and said, "It's not your fault, my dear. If anyone, it's mine." He drew a deep breath. "I don't like unpleasantness, or I would have got rid of Pansy a long time ago." "What?" said Richard. "You knew?" He looked very grim suddenly. Bella put a hand on his arm instinctively. The King said steadily, "My father did not treat Pansy well. I knew it, and I never said." "Oh," said Bella, enlightened. So when she kept on about service to the royal family, what she really meant was that she was in love with the late King. He couldn't marry her, of course. Not that he would have done anyway. Not a loving man, my father. But we didn't marry commoners in those days." "Commoner?" echoed Bella faintly. Lady Pansy of the horse face and ancestors who had served the royal family for 100 years was a commoner? "A technical term," said Richard dryly. "My father means not of the blood royal. Bicycling royals count, daughters of an earl don't. Pansy would never have been a candidate for a royal wife, and she knew it." "And then you wanted me, without any sort of title in my family. No wonder she hated me." "Poor woman," said the Queen. "No husband and children of her own, just us and that flaky niece, and none of us really seeing her properly. She used to drive me mad, and I was so determined to be nice to her." Her voice trailed off. She turned to the King then. For the first time since Bella had known them, she saw the King put an arm around his wife. He did it awkwardly, but it did not look insincere. "Right," said Bella. "I have something to say. Please listen. You've got to stop trying to live other people's lives for them," she said. First to the Queen, and then to Richard. "I know you do it with the best of intentions. It's very sweet. I really appreciate it. Richard was willing to throw himself in front of an assassin's knife for me, and I don't take that lightly, I really don't. And the very first time we met, he took care of me. It's very good of you, my darling, but it has to stop. If I can't make my own mistakes, I'm not human. You ought to know that, if anyone does. She turned to the Queen next. And you have to stop trying to prevent him from taking risks. He's so tender of you and his father, always trying to spare you worry. But he shouldn't. He's a grown man. He knows his own abilities. He needs to test himself without thinking about you and the country and everyone else all the time. Nobody said anything, but the Queen rested her head against the King's chest. Now, Bella went to the door, I'm going back to stay with Lottie. Richard and I will go out in public whenever and wherever we want. I will come to the palace the night before the wedding and not before. I'm taking my life back. Chapter 25. The Day. Morning Times. It was the morning of Bella's wedding day. In the courtyard of the palace, a golden coach awaited the new royal bride. In her borrowed boudoir in the palace, she sat in a gold-embroidered cream dress with flowing medieval sleeves. Brilliant sunlight shone into the window, illuminating a tall mirror. Janet Bray stood back and smiled dreamily. You're beautiful, my darling, just like the woman in your picture. Happy the bride the sun shines on. Bella would have been just as happy if she'd have been stomping up the hill in Wellington boots to marry her Richard in the pouring rain in front of their tower. But she didn't say so. In fact, she didn't say anything at all, because she thought she was hearing something that should have been impossible. A scraping at the brickwork, a sharp and probably profane exclamation, the rending sound of a creeper being ripped from a wall. No, she told herself, it was her imagination. It couldn't be happening. Not on her wedding day. Not with everything timed to a nanosecond. The Prince of Wales, in scarlet regimentals and a gleaming sword, would be getting ready to go to the cathedral even now. I so want you to be happy, my love. Even Finn says you two were born to be together. Yes, I know, Ma. He said the same to me. Mind you, he's impressed that Richard has read all his books. Finn says it's more than he has. Janet looked momentarily shocked. Finn hasn't read his own books? No. He puts them on tape and then forgets about them, apparently. Bella tried to shift her position without actually craning round her mother too obviously. Was it possible that a face had just bobbed up outside the window? No, of course not. It had to be her imagination. Janet half turned to look out. Bella said hurriedly, I can't tell you how grateful I am to Kevin for walking me down the aisle. Janet beamed and faced her again. He was so touched that you wanted him to do it. Bella breathed out in relief. He's a wonderful man. Oh my God! She cried, jumping to her feet. Darling, what is it? Are you nervous? Tell me. Yes, no, I don't know, said Bella, who had definitely seen the face bob up, a hand wave, in greeting, desperation, and both of them disappear again. There had been no loud cry and thud of a falling body, so he was still there. No need to be. I remember my own wedding. Bella passed her options under rapid review. She could call in someone to help now. Richard wouldn't like that unless he was hanging on by a fingernail. No, come to think of it, he would particularly dislike it if he was hanging on by a fingernail. So calling for help wasn't an option either way. In which case, she had to get rid of her mother. And 2 lovely children, finished Janet, misty-eyed. Bella hugged her, said she was wonderful, and walked her backwards towards the door. Yes, Mother. Do you think you could leave me on my own for a bit now? I want to think. Yes, that's right. I want to be alone with my thoughts. It's such a big step, marriage. Of course, love. As soon as the door had closed behind her, Bella flew to the window and flung the sash up. Are you mad? She scolded, leaning out to find her beloved hooked onto the stone windowsill and swinging gently in the breeze. He grinned up at her. His face was dirty and he looked as happy as a schoolboy. Nope. Pretty good mood, actually. Stay right there. Aren't you going to let me in? Not until I've protected myself, said Bella grimly. She was absolutely not going to mention bad luck with him hanging outside her 3rd-story window. She was not even going to think about it. On the other hand, she was not taking any chances either. This bridegroom was not going to get a glimpse of the wedding dress until the appointed hour, just in case. She pulled the pretty chintz coverlet off the bed and wrapped it round herself. Okay then, Spider-Man, in you come. She leaned over the windowsill and helped him haul himself into the room. Once he was there, she breathed again, though she did not let him see her anxiety. You can't tell someone they should be free to try any dangerous stunt they feel like and then freak out when they do, she thought. Damn it. She still couldn't stop herself saying, You could have killed yourself. Nah, said Prince Richard. Dull, stuffy, conscientious, dutiful, unemotional Prince Richard. He stamped some brick dust and paint over the priceless Orbison and tidied his climbing axe away neatly. I told you, I've been looking at this wall for ages, my love. I knew I could do it. But why today? She wailed, backing away from him, chintz clutched to her bosom. He leaned forward and kissed her. Because today I'm marrying you. Today I can do anything. I'm flattered. No, you're not, he said seriously. You know me and I know you, and we both know we're stronger together than we'll ever be apart. And we'll have a hell of a lot more fun, too. I'll hold you to that, said Bella, unbearably moved and absolutely determined not to cry and mess up the work of art that was her makeup. But if you get dust on my wedding dress, I will kill you, after all the effort it cost. And you still owe me a limerick, you waster. Ah, he said. Glad you mentioned that. Here it is. And from inside his climbing suit he produced a neat piece of parchment with the 5-line verse written out in a hand that would not have shamed Shakespeare. Enjoy. See you in church. Cathedral, she shouted after him. But he had already shut the door behind him. So she sat down in front of the mirror and looked at herself, in her fairy tale dress, with her fairy tale tiara and the bouquet of soft summer flowers, with the trails of ivy that Richard had insisted on. And then she looked at the ring he had designed for her, and read his poem, and blushed, and laughed, and blushed and read it again, and dabbed, terribly, terribly carefully, at the corner of her eyes. Then picked up her lovely skirts, and went to promise her love everything she had to give. There we have it. Bella and Richard united at last. A lovely story. What did you think of it? Do let me know down in the comments. For those of you that have been following me right from the beginning of my reading of Tamaria Prince, I do apologise for how long it took me to get through this one, but thank you so much for sticking with me. It's been in the works for 2 or 3 years, unbelievably. I started doing regular recordings a couple of years ago, and then we had a few chapters recorded during my live streams. And yeah, time just ticked on. There have been many other projects that I've been focusing on, but here we have it at last. The story coming to its very sweet and rather romantic conclusion. It's been a pleasure to read to you as always. Do let me know what you would like to hear next, and of course, subscribe to my channel, leave a like on the video, and see what else you can find from me on my channel. There are plenty of full audiobooks and all sorts of other things available for you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Until next time, you take care. Read to you soon.